Okay, we are live and we're going to be talking. This is probably going to be a shorter stream unless we get like a ton of viewers asking questions about, what's a good deal, which one of these should I get, etc. So let me go ahead and fire up Paint so I have that in the background as well because we might want to use that later. Let me see if I can get like a window. If I change this over to Paint, then what happens? Okay, then you guys can see Paint. Okay, but if I want... Hold on. Does the whole thing show up? No, it's cut off. Okay. So that one will come in handy later. So let me... That one will come in. Okay, just checking to see, make sure the audio is good. Change that back to Paint or Opera. Okay. So, deals, tech deals in Microcenter, and we're also going to talk about Newegg. So this is going to be the two. What's this? Get Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection when you buy select AMD Ryzen 5000 processors. So it looks like Newegg has this is new to me. I didn't know about this. Does Microcenter have the same thing? I don't think so. No. So it looks like... Okay, so they're trying to create incentive. So is it select or any of them? So select. So it looks like it works on pretty much all of them. So it looks like it's pretty much all of them. You can get Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection. It's the collection. Oh, Legacy of Thieves collection. Why does it say collection? Uncharted Legacy of Thieves. It's A Thief's End. The Lost Legacy. Isn't that just Uncharted 3? I haven't played the Uncharted games after 2. Like, I played a tiny bit of 1, and then I played 2, and I played, like, all of 2. But I never played 3, and I think there was a 4. Maybe it's A Thief's End is 4, and I can't remember anymore. It's been so long. Like, Uncharted 1 and 2 were on the PS3. I don't even know which one. Like, was Uncharted 3 on the PS4, and then Uncharted 4 is also on the PS4. I don't remember. But anyway, I didn't know that. So this is new. So you get Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection when you buy a select, basically any of the Ryzen 5000 series processors. So I mean, if you like Uncharted and you want to play that on PC, then this might be worth looking into. It looks like they're already sold out of this one. So the Vermeer 5800X is all gone. What is this? This is the 5700X. For 196. They've sold out of these two. So it looks like they still have the X3D, although if you live near a Microcenter, right now the X3D I think is like $319. If we go back here, let's $219 for the 5800X, and then $319 for the 5800X3D. So the Vcache one, the one that everybody's looking for, is like $319 at Microcenter. That's actually really good. Man, this would straight up like so the weird thing is Microcenter has a lot of like really interesting bundles right now. So I feel like Microcenter, if you live near a Microcenter and you missed out on Black Friday for whatever reason, they have similar deals to what they had during Black Friday. Now, what I've noticed is the deals are a little bit different. So, like, for example, during Black Friday, they didn't have the $50 Asus motherboards with the 12th gen. I think they had, like, a different deal with the 12th gen. I forgot exactly which one it was. But the Ryzen 7000 series didn't really change. Like, these bundles with the free G-Skill memory was kind of always there. And then the other thing too was I think this deal, so the 11th gen Intel Core i7 11700K with the Asus Z590 Plus Tough Gaming Wi-Fi. Like, this one was actually cheaper during Black Friday. So, and that was something that I alluded to on the previous live stream. I did point that deal out. In fact, that deal was too good for me to pass up, so I did actually get one of those. I did get the 11700K. It is the official, it says here, official processor partner of the Olympics. So the 2021 Tokyo Olympics was all about Rocket Lake, apparently, or like Rocket Lake was like the main thing. So whatever that was, because I know there's probably gonna be people that join the stream, they're gonna be like, what, Rocket Lake? Why? So Rocket Lake, I just had to get one. It was too good of a deal to pass up. During Black Friday, this was like $248, so it was $40 cheaper than the current deal. But this is honestly still a pretty good deal, because I feel like if you're on something that's really old, like as long as you're on a DDR4 platform, like for example, if you're on an Intel Skylake system, so if you have an i7 6700K or a i5 6600K, or maybe a Kaby Lake part, or maybe the i9 9900K, but I would say if you're on the 9900K, this might not feel like a super upgrade, but it is still faster. So I mean, this is still a decent deal if you have DDR4 memory. Like if you're on something that's older than DDR4, like for example, if you're on Haswell, so you have like a 4790K or a 4670K, or something older like Ivy Bridge, which is 10 years old. That processor was from 2012. In fact, we should probably look some of those up. So if we go to i5 3570K, we look that up on Intel Arc. And when I say Intel Arc, I mean Arc as in ARK, not ARC. So you guys can see here, the Intel Core i5 3570K was a 22 nanometer, and it's discontinued obviously, and it was released in Q2 of 2012, making this processor almost 11 years old. So it's like 10 and a half years old. So if you're on something like this, then this is a massive upgrade to an 11th gen 11700K with a free Asus Z590 Plus Tough Gaming Wi-Fi. So I feel like this would be a good upgrade, although I don't think this is the best upgrade for the money because, and we'll talk about why in a little bit, but the reason why this is still a decent upgrade because it's still going to be way, way faster than like an Ivy Bridge i5 or i7. But the thing is, you get the free motherboard, you get an i7 8-core 16-thread, which is on par with a Ryzen 5700X. This is a little bit slower than a 5800X, but it's about the same as a 5700X in terms of what the gaming performance is going to be, what the content creation or like rendering, multi-thread workload. It's an 8-core 16-thread Intel part. No E-cores. It's still 14 nanometers, so you can expect it to generate a lot of heat compared to the Ryzen processors. But the thing is, this is still going to be a massive upgrade over like a DDR3 platform. However, if you were on a i5 3570K, I would probably not recommend this unless you're on a strict budget, because this is still going to be a decent upgrade. It's a massive upgrade, and you got to think about it like this. They're bundling a $200 motherboard. So a $199, this is a $200 Asus TUF Z590 motherboard. This is essentially for free with this processor. So you're basically getting a discounted processor, which is under $300 for an i7. And you're getting a free motherboard. So the only other thing that you'd have to buy is the memory, like DDR4. And the DDR4 memory is like very cheap compared to DDR5. So I feel like this would be a really good upgrade for somebody who's on like an i5, 3rd gen, 4th gen, 5th gen. But if you're on DDR3, then I still think that there's probably a better upgrade path. Like if you if you stuck with this this processor for so long, this memory for so long, and now either the the VRMs or the capacitors on the motherboard are starting to leak or it's starting to go bad, or it just doesn't perform like it used to, just because newer software applications are more resource intensive or whatever, or you want to go to Windows 11, or those sort of reasons, whatever the reason may be, to upgrade off of an old Intel platform, you're probably going to want to go to DDR5. So, and the fact that you had a computer like this for maybe up to 10 years, it's worth it to just go to DDR5 and completely skip DDR4. I mean, that's what I would do. So rather than get this, this makes sense for somebody who can reuse DDR4 memory so they can maximize the cost savings by going this route. And they don't care too much about having the latest and greatest. Because this is from 2021, which means that, we're about to be in 2023. So, if you're someone who doesn't like the idea of buying a 2021 processor right when it's about to become 2023, then this is probably not going to be a good recommendation. But it's good if you can reuse DDR4 memory, so you can maximize the cost savings. So you basically spend $289 plus tax. You get this, you get the motherboard, and you recycle your DDR4 memory into this build, keep the exact same power supply, everything else, upgrade complete. It's a pretty simple upgrade. Probably the easiest upgrade to do, to be honest. So the other deal, what I would probably suggest to somebody who's on an old DDR3 based Intel or AMD platform, like Bulldozer or the FX Pile Driver, 8350, those sort of platforms, I would probably recommend one of these two right here. So either the Ryzen 5 7600X Raphael with the free 16 gigabytes DDR5. Now it does say single channel because it's going to be one stick of RAM, but DDR5 is a little bit different from DDR4. So DDR5, it's still going to be kind of like having a quasi dual channel. It's not really dual channel, but you do get two sets of the memory chips per DIMM. So this is kind of like dual channel, but not really. It's not true dual channel, even though it's one stick of RAM. But the fact is, if you're running a single stick of DDR5, it won't be as much of a performance loss or a penalty with running one DIMM as opposed to running one DIMM of DDR3 or DDR4. So this is something that you can use kind of. I see this as more like a starter kit, just to get you up and running, and then like later on you can double up to 32 gigs of RAM, sometime in the future. So this is probably what I would recommend if somebody's on something really, really old, like an old 3rd gen i5. I feel like this was a really good upgrade because you basically skip DDR4 completely. You get free DDR5 to start the build, and then you get to choose whatever motherboard you want. Now, the one thing I'll say, looking back at the Intel bundles, so all these Intel bundles that are 12th gen. Oh, hey Kevin. Hey, I'm just talking about like the last kind of holiday special deals here for Microcenter. We're also looking at Newegg later on, and we're gonna try to look at graphics cards too later in the stream. But I think I'd start out with like platform cost and who these deals make sense for, and like if I was gonna choose one of these deals, which one I would go with, and what my reasoning behind that is. So we kind of started out at the bottom here with these lower priced ones, and we're gonna work our way up. But like I was saying, with the Ryzen starter kit here, so the Ryzen 5 for $247, you get this plus 16 gigabytes of RAM. So you basically get to choose whatever motherboard you want. If you want to go with the Intel 12th gen option, so they do have these three here. So if we look at the i5 first, so this one right here, $248.98. So basically $250 for the i5 12600K. You would skip Intel deals at this point, to be honest, except the 12700K. Well, okay, so here's the scenario. What I've done is I've proposed a scenario. So we're looking at the use case where someone has an Intel Core i5 3570K. So this is a DDR3 based platform. So on a very old 10-year-old computer, because you can see this was released in Q2 of 2012. So this is what we're working with. We're trying to figure out what is the most optimal deal for someone who is on this processor thinking of upgrading. And they live near Microcenter. So what would they choose? So the first choice I was looking at is the 11th gen 11700K plus the free motherboard. Now, the reason why I don't like this deal for someone who has a DDR3 based platform is because I would probably just skip DDR4 completely, basically skip the entire DDR4 generation and go straight to DDR5. So that kind of leads to the Ryzen options, because they basically give you free RAM regardless of which one you choose. So you get to choose whatever motherboard. Now, if we look at the Intel ones, you have to buy the memory, but they do drop the motherboard to $50. So, but the only problem, there's a caveat there on the Intel side. So with the Intel one, you're locked in to a certain Asus motherboards. They're either going to be the Prime DDR4 or the Prime DDR5, or they're going to be the Asus, the Z690 Tough DDR4. I don't know if the DDR5 is on here. Oh yeah, it is. Okay, so, but it looks like, so if we're looking at the i5 deal, so it's going to be these down here. The choices are the Prime DDR4, DDR5, the Tough DDR4, and some other Prime DDR5. It looks like there's like the same, I don't know why they list the same one over and over again. That's kind of confusing. Oh, they got like an MATX one. So this is kind of the only caveat of going with the Intel deal is you're forced to buy Asus motherboard that you may or may not want. The Prime can't handle the overclock. Yeah, the Tough, so the Tough is, so like if we click on this, so this one is about $300. So I guess, is this the actual cost? So 300. So basically 200 for a, or 300 for a 12600K 6-core 12-thread plus 4 E-cores. So basically 16-thread total. And you get a Tough motherboard. So the only thing is with this, you would still have to buy the DDR4 memory. And like I was saying earlier, if I was on a DDR3 motherboard, I want to skip DDR4 completely. Even though DDR4 is cheaper than DDR5, I would still want to start on DDR5, pay the extra money up front now, get DDR5, and be done with the whole thing. It's because, like, think about it like this. My mentality is if somebody has a 10-year-old computer, they should pretty much have money. I mean, even if they're on a budget, they should pretty much have enough extra money to spend for the DDR5 over the DDR4, or just get an AMD Ryzen 7000 series and get DDR5 for free at the discounted price on the processor, and then just choose a motherboard. And so, so what I would say is if someone had this, I think the most optimal deal is either going to be the Ryzen 5 or the Ryzen 7. I'm leaning more toward the Ryzen 7 because you get 32 gigabytes of DDR5 6000. That's not like cheap RAM. That's really good RAM. And it's 32 gigs right out the gate. So, and it's an 8-core 16-thread processor. And you're not locked into any motherboard. You can basically choose whatever motherboard you want. It doesn't have to be an Asus Tough or an Asus Prime. You know, if you want a Gigabyte board or an ASRock board or one of those Aorus Master, whatever, or you know, whatever you want, like you have the option MSI, Carbon Wi-Fi, all that kind of stuff. So I do feel like this is probably better for somebody who's coming from a really, really old 10-year-old computer. So that's what I would do. I would probably go with one of the Ryzen deals. Hey Joel, we're talking about last minute Christmas or holiday shopping, like right before the end of the year here. Kind of see like, do these deals make sense, and what's kind of like the best optimal choice. So I've proposed like a basic scenario here. So like a what if scenario. What if somebody had an i5 3570K from Q2 of 2012, literally making this processor 10 and a half years old. So on a 10 and a half year old platform, it's DDR3. So there's the DDR3 spec. And so what should and they live near a Micro Center. What would be the optimal bundle out of this entire list to go with? Now, assuming they have a limited budget, right? So so if they choose the super high-end stuff up here, that's not going to leave much money for like a graphics card upgrade, because that's basically eating into, they can't really get an M.2 drive that's 2 terabyte or more than one M.2 drive if they go with this route. So the way I see it, if someone's on an i5 and it's super old, I would probably go with a Ryzen 7 DDR5. This 345 one seems like this is the best deal. And the use case is gaming. Let me rephrase that. The use case is gaming. Yeah, especially in Windows 10. So here's the scenario. They're on Windows 10. They currently have this old 10-year-old i5. They're going to stay on Windows 10. They're going to try to reuse as much as possible. So they're going to reuse the case. They're going to reuse the 650 watt power supply. They're going to reuse, the peripherals, all that other stuff. So what are we saying here? So main problem is people who buy a PC once in 7+ years don't upgrade like ever. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it's 10 years old. It probably has a bunch of those Spectre Meltdown vulnerabilities that were never fixed on this old discontinued platform. So, because it's super old, it's definitely end of life, way beyond end of life. So, what I would say, if it was me, I would go with the Ryzen 7. So, it's a huge upgrade regardless, but we're going from a 5 to a 7. Now, granted, we're going from Intel to AMD, but that doesn't really matter too much because we're looking at, like, best deal. And right now, you basically get 32 gigabytes of DDR5 bundled with the processor, $345, and then you get to choose whatever motherboard you want. And then they give you $20 off whatever motherboard you choose. It's also much more power efficient than any 13th gen. Well, okay, the requirement here is that you have to choose from one of these bundles. So the 13th gen is completely out of the picture because there's no deal with 13th gen. If you look here, this is the 12900K. Basically, it's 12th gen, 11th gen, and Ryzen 7000. Those are the bundle deals. There's no 5800X3D. There's no Ryzen 5000, and there's no Intel 13th gen. Like those aren't actually in the picture here. It's literally like, what's the best choice from what's available from this list? I personally say the Ryzen 7 7700X with the 32 gigabytes of DDR5 6000 for $345. I think this one is the most optimal deal. That's my pick. Like the only other one that makes sense is maybe the i5 for $248 plus $50, so it basically becomes $300 roughly, and then you still have to buy the memory. So it's like spend $50 on a motherboard plus buy memory DDR5, or free memory and then buy an AM5 motherboard. You would argue for $7,900 for people who don't plan to upgrade for 6-7 years. I mean, I can see that, but I don't know. Like, do you really think like in 10 years, or let's just say like you're saying like 6 to 7 years, do you really think that a 12-core processor, or let me rephrase that, do you really think that it depends on how you look at it. Do you really think a 12-core processor is absolutely necessary? And on the flip side of that, is an 8-core processor not going to be enough 6 years from now? And keep in mind, it's 8-core 16-thread. It's not like it's an 8-core 8-thread. It's 8-core 16-thread. This one's going to be 12-core 24-thread. For people who are into tech, they can go 7600. The 7900X is overkill for gaming since most. So the use case here, I guess I should have said that. I did say it earlier, but I don't think you were watching. But the use case is going to be gaming, because remember, like when the i5, when this was purchased, it was typically purchased as a gaming PC. Like this was a highly recommended gaming processor that would typically be compared with an FX 8350 from AMD back in the day. So that was the equivalent on the AMD side. Was a top of the line FX 8350. They didn't really have anything that competed directly with an i7 at the time. So workstation tasks will benefit. Yeah, but the use case is basically going to be gaming. It's not really going to be a lot of work. There's not going to be like a lot of multi-threading use case. Because you think about the user, right? The user is used to using... This is a 4-core, 4-thread. This doesn't even have hyper-threading. It's 4-core, 4-thread. And I'm talking about going from a 4-core, 4-thread to an 8-core, 16-thread. People who... Oh, workstation tasks. People were also buying the 6600K, which was enough. Yeah, and the 6600K was the same thing. It was a 4-core, 4-thread. But see, this is really different from that, because this is going to be 16-thread. The Ryzen 7 7700X, it's technically the fastest AMD gaming processor, because it's actually a little bit faster. In some titles, it's slower, but in most titles, or I would say just going off of Hardware Unboxed a video review, the 7700X in gaming actually beats the 7950X and the 12900K, I should add, in a lot of games. I remember seeing the 12-game average chart that they showed at the end of the video, and this processor was typically faster than both the Ryzen 9 and the Intel 12th Gen i9 in a lot of cases. Not in all games, but in most games. I want to say like 65% of the time it was faster than both of them. So if we're talking about gaming, I feel like this is actually the way to go. It's a single CCD, so the latency thing, it's less complex, slightly less complex to cool than the dual CCD chips. So that's why, I don't know, I'm kind of leaning more to this. But I can understand the logic behind the 7900X. I just don't think for the use case, like if it's going to be gaming only, like primarily gaming, and it's not really going to be doing a whole lot more, I don't know. I kind of think like 345. This is like pretty optimal. You can play games on 12100 if all you care about game performance, but it will cause issues with downloads on Steam, I feel. 8 cores will run every game for the next 5 years, but with worse frame times. Possibly, but think about like the performance of this processor today. It would be pretty bad, right? But it didn't become bad until like 4 or 5 years ago was when this started becoming bad. Like I want to say it was around like 2017, 2018. That was when games started using 6 threads. You would see them use there'd be primary, like 3 to 4 threads were the primary, and then you could have like 2 background threads that would run, like like one for networking and then like one for some other thing for like latency, telemetry stuff. That would be like your 5th and your 6th thread. So like that, this is basically not good for that, right? So but this has 16 threads, so this should be able to handle that just fine. Yeah, I mean, I kind of think this works, but this is just going to be more money. And the thing is, I feel like this is just the Ryzen 9 is going to be a little bit less optimal, because the use case is never really going to do anything with gaming or with multi-threaded stuff. Like no, it's not going to be using DaVinci Resolve. It's not going to be using Adobe Premiere or any kind of weird one-off task that requires like AVX2 advanced vector extension. Like that's not going to be a thing with this use case. So I kind of think the Ryzen 7 is good enough. I mean, we're still going from an i5 to a Ryzen 7, so there's still a bump in the number, right? Still going from a 5 to a 7. But you guys are saying like go to a 9. I don't know if that's really needed. You're not factoring in that we were in a CPU stagnation from 2011 to 2017. Yeah, but the thing is, like, you gotta remember, this processor has 16 threads. It's 8 core, but it's 16 thread. So it's like, yeah, it's not like true 16 cores, but it's still better than 4 core, 4 thread, right? Like that old i5 is only 4 cores and 4 threads. This is 8 cores, 16 threads. So I personally feel like this being a true 8 core, it in most use cases will age better than this, like than this i5. The i5 with the 6 core plus the 4 E core. The E cores are so cumbersome for, like, if you don't have Windows 11, the E cores are completely useless. And in a lot of, not a lot of cases, but in some cases, they reduce performance. And I can actually vouch for that. So you guys know that I have, well, I was using the 12700K up until I upgraded it to, you guys know what. I always show these because these are like little props that I have. I keep the boxes of the CPUs that I have just to kind of show them as props. But I can personally, from my own personal experience, I can say that I have seen performance regressions in certain applications. Best case example, Final Fantasy XIV. Final Fantasy XIV has a lower average frame rate when you have the E-cores turned on. When you turn off the E-cores and you run this as a pure 8-core, 16-thread, basically turn this into the same thing as a Ryzen 7 7700X, then you get better performance when you have the E-cores off. So I don't like the E-cores, especially with Windows 10. Any number of cores over 8 are not going to help very much in the future, since IPC gains and clock speeds are more useful. Even the 5800X might age better than the 1260. Yeah, I would agree that. Well, I don't know about that, because the IPC on the performance cores on the Alder Lake are better than Zen 3. So it's like, okay, the argument there is like, okay, 6 better IPC cores versus 8 like slightly weaker performance cores. I don't know. It kind of depends on scaling. But then the E-cores kind of help. Whenever you talk about multi-thread, then the E-cores do actually do something. So, I don't know. I feel like those two will probably age the same. Well, what he's saying is that basically he's saying that single thread is going to still be the most relevant thing when you're like in terms of performance. When you're wanting to evaluate performance, IPC and the single thread metric is the most important thing, because that automatically can imply what your multi-threading performance looks like, but not in all cases, right? Because like with more cores that have lower IPC, obviously in multi-threaded workloads, the lower IPC but the higher core count will beat less cores, higher IPC, right? Unless the IPC on those lower core counts is just significantly higher than those multi-core alternatives. Like, best case example I can give you, right? Like the old FX 8350 was an 8-core. It was more like a 4-core 8-thread, but AMD marketed it as an 8-core. The IPC was terrible compared to Intel's i7, which was just a 4-core. Those 4 cores on Intel were doing better, like they had better IPC throughput than the 8 cores on the AMD FX. So that's kind of a good example that I can give you. R5 will be 6 cores in 4 years. What? Oh. Yeah. You know, we were talking about that in the previous stream, that maybe the next Ryzen 7 will be a 10-core, and then the Ryzen 5 will become an 8-core. I can see that happening, and then they'll introduce like a Ryzen 3. So a Ryzen 3 could become the 6-core, a Ryzen 5 becomes an 8-core, and the Ryzen 7 is a 10-core, and then Ryzen 9 kind of stays where it is with 12 and 16. Or maybe they up the count at the higher end to like an 18-core or a 20-core or something. You know, like I can see them doing stuff like that. But that's really going to depend on the packaging technology and also the process node. Like With the node shrink, are they able to fit additional cores into those CCDs? That's really what it's going to boil down to. Or are they going to try to bolt on like a third chiplet or like a third CCD? Make smaller CCDs with bigger cores in each CCD, right? So if let's say you do like if you do 6, 12, 18, you can get like an 18 core let's say we got like a 3 CCD with 6 cores each. So that's going to give you 18 cores, and like 6 of them per CCD. You'll need like a bigger Infinity fabric, but there's nothing they can't do with there. I mean, that's pretty scalable, I would say. The only way I see them making Ryzen 7 10 core is if all 10 cores can fit on a single CCD. Well, if they make a bigger core, right? Like, I can see them doing less cores per CCD if they make the cores bigger. Like, if they increase the cache to the point where the cache starts eating up space where a core would typically go, then the idea is, well, think of like the 3D cache, right? Like if they make a big cache, but instead of making it 3D stacked, make it linear or planar, but just make it take up even more area in the CCD. So then you reduce your core count, but give it a whole lot of cache. So that means that the gaming performance is going to be really, really good. And then obviously the newer process node from TSMC will make it clock higher or just get better IPC. Whatever optimizations they want to do. With less cores per CCD, there's less like latency pinging within that CCD. So I don't know. I feel like less cores doesn't necessarily mean like less cores per CCD doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to be good. Because think about Intel. Like Intel's been stuck with 8 cores ever since Rocket Lake. They can't scale beyond 8 performance cores. That's the whole reason why they made E-cores, was because they couldn't fit big cores, so they had to start making little cores and fill them in the space where they had available space to stuff something in there. TSMC 3nm could fit 24 cores minimum. I mean, we kind of already see this, right? So I don't know how... Let me just kind of switch over real quick to Paint. Let me see, where's Paint at? So, like, we've already seen, like, I don't know how much you guys pay attention to the enterprise, but the Epic server, so, like, Bergamo... Why do I always spell that wrong? Epic, the Bergamo, so we know next year there's going to be Genoa. But Bergamo has, like, these groups of these CCDs, basically. It's got like CCDs on it that are like they're not called, they're like 128 C is what they call it. This is supposed to be like, this stands for cloud. It's supposed to be for the cloud, so it's gonna be like in Amazon's data center. Well, it's not like it's going to, it's already kind of there. They just need to kind of flesh some things out with the power delivery. But basically, all I'm trying to say is this type of core is a smaller core than what they have on the big, like, traditional cores that we're aware of today. So the Bergamo core is smaller than the Genoa core. The Genoa core... Genoa is Zen 4. So Genoa is their server based off of the same type of core technology found in the Ryzen 7000 series. But Bergamo is what they call Zen 4C. Like I said, C is cloud. But basically it's like a smaller core, but they're able to get 128 cores. Yeah, it reached 7K, like, on the previous stream, actually. It was, like, a couple days ago we hit 7K. Like, I was live when it happened, too. Do you... Hold on. So there's a lot of comments here. Vcache models will stay separate or will... Oh, do you know if Vcache models will stay separate or will they default from Zen 5? No, there's gonna be Vcache for Zen 4. That's coming next year. Now, I don't know when it's gonna release. I would guess around April or May is when I expect us to get Zen 4C. Or not Zen 4C. Zen 4C is gonna be Enterprise. I mean the Ryzen 7 7800X3D. If you're asking about this processor, a lot of people think that it's coming in January. It's not going to come in January, guys. That's way too early. They might show it off at CES, but realistically, this thing is probably coming May. Or Q2. This is definitely going to be like Q2 of 2023. Like, whoever keeps thinking that this is going to... Like, the thing is, people keep saying, like, oh, I'm going to hold off getting AM5 because I'm just going to get this thing in January. Well, no one's saying this is coming in January. Realistically, this is probably Q2 2023. I would not be surprised at all if this was like May or April. Or maybe even June, but typically May. Because when did the 5800X3D come out? Wasn't it like April, May? So it's like pretty much a year later, the newer one comes out. So that's going to be the next Vcache CPU. The 10900K had a 10 core. Yes, it was a 10. Yeah, it's monolithic, but that's what I'm saying. Like it kind of depends on what direction they want to go with the chiplet. Like, do they want to make the chiplet have bigger number of cores or bigger cores but less amount? Like, if you do, like, for example, what I was saying is if they make like a I don't know why this keeps on doing this little dot. That's annoying. But like if this is a 6-core CCD, and then like this whole region over here is just cache. If this is just like either the L3 cache, so you have like the L1 and the L2 like somewhere on each of these somewhere. There's like a region where the cache would be for each of these. Regardless, like if this is L3 and this whole thing is one CCD, if this is smaller than like the current design, which would be, you know, an 8-core, which would be probably larger than this. It's not drawn to scale, obviously, but let's just say we had a larger one. Like if the original one is this big and it's 8 cores, so there's like 8 of these guys in here. So like 4 here, and then like 4 here, or however it looks. It's been a long time since I looked at the die on the CCD, but you guys get what I'm saying. There's like typically cache regions here, and then there's like some other stuff interconnecting them there that goes to the Infinity Fabric on the I/O die. So if they can shrink this to about this size, and then like copy paste this 2 more times, then you have an 18-core processor. You have an 18-core Ryzen 9. That's just like one way of doing it. But you could also go the other way. You could like make a CCD larger and put more cores on it. Like like 10 cores. So then if you have 2 CCDs, then that's a 20 core. So yeah, that would work too, I guess. It just kind of depends. I feel like I think the cool thing about the 3D, the Vcache, was it kind of showed that you can throw copious amounts of cache at a problem, and like in this case, if you want to improve gaming performance, you just throw a whole bunch of cache at the problem and it just fixes the problem, like without having to do much else. Like you can even drive down the clock speed lower and you'll still have better performance because you just threw so much cache at the problem. So that's kind of the interesting thing about the whole Vcache story, right? That's kind of its claim to fame. You don't have to do anything to your cores, just put more cache on there, stack cache on top of them, and watch your gaming performance go way up. Because I mean that's how you can justify an extra $100 for the 5800 X3D over a 5800 non X3D. So that's kind of one way to do it. Let me go back to the deals. Star Citizen, yeah, and it's a good thing you bring up Star Citizen, because I was thinking of like what's a good example of the Vcache. Star Citizen is probably the best use case example, or the best real world example of the Vcache in action. That game, like Star Citizen, benefits so much from that one processor. It's amazing. Really? See, I don't know about that. Like the PS3 emulator, I'm not so sure if it benefits the same way. I feel like the PS3 emulator benefits more from really high clock speed, and just high IPC. Because I know the Ryzen, like the new 7000 series processors, they perform a lot better in RPC over like any of the 5800 stuff, like 5800 X3D and all the other Zen 3 stuff. Same thing with the Intel, like 12th gen and 13th gen do better in that. The one thing that I found kind of weird, maybe, well, you know what, maybe it's because of AVX 512, I don't know. Maybe the reason why these perform better is because they have AVX 512. But kind of going back on to the original question, if someone had an i5 3570K from 10 years ago, which bundle is the best one for them? I would say this one, Ryzen 7 7700X. Like, this one is probably a good second place, and then the Ryzen 5 would be like third place. The reason why this one is probably, I would still opt for the $400+ option, is because you're getting the 32 gigabytes of memory, you're getting the 12 core. If you're someone who has kept a computer for 10 years, most likely, like Joel was saying, they're probably going to hold onto the computer for like 6 years or more. So then this kind of makes a lot more sense than buying a Ryzen 5. But who knows, if the person wants to be really, really cheap, the fact that they were on an i5 for a decade, you know, what's to say that they don't just get another 5-class product, like the Ryzen 5, for instance, get the free memory, and just pick a motherboard, like a cheap B650 motherboard, or even like a B650M, like a micro ATX, and just go with that for like $400 for that setup. So that would be the El Cheapo way to do it. The Intel offerings don't look good because like the whole idea of recommending the Ryzen 7000 is you get the free DDR5. So you literally skip all of DDR4 because you're on DDR3. You can't, like, if you want to go to DDR4, you have to buy memory. If you want to go to DDR5, you have to buy memory. So the fact that these give you the DDR5 for free, and it's actually really good memory, DDR5 6000, this is kind of the best choice. Like, the Intel ones don't make much sense. You're forced to buy an Asus motherboard that you might not really like. It's going to be the Prime. There's like the Tough, which is okay, but still, like, you're forced to buy an Asus board. So you can't pick, like if you're an MSI fan or a Gigabyte fan or an ASRock fan, you know, these don't look enticing, right? So they're kind of more limited in scale. And the fact that you can't choose 13th gen also makes the Intel offerings seem kind of middle of the road. So an interesting case though. Like, I would say the Intel ones make more sense if someone already has DDR4 memory. Well, I mean, I'm stuck. I pretty much upgraded to just full on Gigabyte this year. It was really weird. I've typically had Asus and MSI. I've never had an ASRock motherboard, which is very interesting. When I reviewed the ASRock boards, well, not really review, but when I did that overview video on X670, I did like the ASRock motherboards. I did think that they were pretty good. I do think that ASRock does seem like they make kind of questionable decisions on some of their motherboards, particularly their high-end motherboards like the Taichi. But I don't know. I do think that ASRock does give you a ton of options in the BIOS. Like ASRock seems to expose the most amount of settings to the user, regardless of whether or not the user will ever use those settings, is the flip side of that. But it's nice to have the option to configure all these things that you may never use. Whereas I feel like MSI historically has been the most limiting in terms of what they allow you to configure in the BIOS. But ASRock seems to give you basically everything. ASRock BIOS used to be trash, not sure about now. I mean, I don't know. I can't really comment too much on them because I never actually owned an ASRock motherboard. So I can't really confirm or deny those type of comments. You wouldn't recommend ASRock? I mean, I hope both of you have had ASRock motherboards in the past, so you're making those statements, because I would never make a random statement like, "Oh, this brand is trash." If I've never had any experience with the brand, I would never comment like that. But I personally have owned Asus, MSI, and then like my first motherboard. Well, okay, my first motherboard was an EVGA. Then I had Asus, and pretty much just Asus for a long time until I got my first Intel CPU, which then I got an MSI motherboard, and then when I went to Ryzen, I got the Crosshair 6, so I was back on Asus, and then I stuck with Asus until now, basically. Like now I basically have gotten Gigabyte. Like I never had a Gigabyte motherboard before until this year. Like I have Gigabyte on my 7950X platform, which is the Aorus Master, and then I also have it on the 13th gen platform, strangely enough. So that one's also on a Gigabyte Aorus Master. So I now have dual Gigabyte boards. You built a low-end desktop appearance with an Asus B450. One of the worst motherboards I've ever used. Well, I had a strange problem with my X570 Crosshair 8. My Crosshair 8 Hero from Asus, like, for some reason, and I don't know how to fix it because I tried uninstalling and reinstalling the audio drivers. For some reason, certain games, the audio, like the in-game audio, will be very quiet compared to the rest of the desktop audio. Like, YouTube will be normal volume. Discord, anything else will be normal volume, but then the game audio will be really, really soft and really quiet. But it doesn't happen for every single game. It's only like a few games. Like Genshin Impact is normal. Final Fantasy 14 is normal. But then I'll fire up like some random indie game on Steam, and then the audio is like super quiet for some reason, even though I have the volume slider in the menus to max for that game. So, and I could never figure that out. But then when I switched to Gigabyte, problem solved. Like I didn't reinstall Windows. I literally just put the SSD in the Gigabyte motherboard, reactivate Windows, and then I'm done. And then all the drivers get installed, and then my audio problem is fixed. So Gigabyte improved a lot in the last couple of years. Asus has the biggest margins. Don't go Asus on low end. I do think Asus has gotten a little bit too... How should I say this? Asus has gotten a little bit too big-headed. Like, the fact that they don't show you the block diagram in their manuals, where every other brand does, and they don't, that's a bad thing, in my mind. Like, for the user, that's just straight up bad. Because you don't know, like, you're left guessing, like, what connects where. So, like, for instance, when I did the coverage on the X670 motherboards, like, the X670 motherboards are unique because they use dual chipsets. There's a primary chipset and a secondary chipset. Well, the thing is, without the block diagram, you have no idea of knowing if your second or third M.2 drive is connected to the first chipset, or is it on the second chipset? Is the LAN on the first chipset or the second one? Where are my SATA drives connected? You know what I'm saying? Like, without the block diagram, there's no way of knowing that. So that's just really, really annoying. especially like if you were to buy like an expensive crosshair. So the crosshair hero, so for those wondering, like I historically have always bought like Asus when it comes to AMD. So I guess I'll bring up Paint again just to kind of list my Asus history so you guys know. So let me clear off this. We don't need this stuff anymore. So my first motherboard was an EVGA for socket 939 AMD 64 Athlon, whatever it was. It was that was like my very first computer when I didn't really know anything about computers. So I didn't know what brand was good, what brand was bad. I just chose whatever I could afford that wasn't like bargain bin cheap, worst one on the planet, or the most expensive one on the planet. So that was my very first one. The second motherboard was an Asus M something. It was for Phenom 2. It was like Athlon 2, Phenom 2, Phenom whatever. It was like the Phenom 2 X4, X6. So basically like the AMD ones right before Bulldozer. So that was like an Asus motherboard. I forget like what the motherboard was called for AMD Phenom. This was socket 939, or I guess EVGA for that. And this was socket AM3. It was AM3. That's what that was. So that was my first Asus motherboard, for those wondering. Then I got an Asus Crosshair 5 Formula Z for AM3 Plus, AMD FX 8350. I have YouTube videos showing this process or this very system on my channel, but it's like a long time ago. It's like 10 years ago or like 9 years ago or something. So, and then after that, I got MSI Z87 GD65 gaming for Intel i7 4770K Haswell. So you guys can see from here, like this motherboard was so old, and I didn't know that much about computers back then, that this is kind of a distant memory. So really my experience, you can tell, is gonna be Asus. And then like I went to Ryzen, Asus Crosshair 6 Hero, AM4 Ryzen 7 1800X. So this system, which I had for a number of years. I only recently retired this motherboard because now I have the new AM5 stuff. MSI also has some decent mid-range motherboards. MSI, I do like the Carbon Max, Carbon Wi-Fi from MSI. Those I think are like really good value because they basically give you all the features that you would actually use without bombarding you with copious amounts of RGB and other random like things that you probably won't ever use. So that one, and then what? The Gigabyte Z690 DDR4 or Gaming X or something. I think it's Gaming X or Z690 Gaming X DDR4 for the 12700K i7. And I mean, this saw lots of upgrades. This also, I got one of these. I got one of those. So this shows you the power of AM5 or AM4, I should say. Look at that. 3 processors all on one motherboard. Were you able to buy that, by the way? No, I still can't find one. I mean, I was checking Newegg, and Newegg shows like some of the listings say ETA tomorrow, so December 23rd. So I'm gonna try like really early in the morning to spam like Newegg listings to see if I can get one then. But I don't know. I'm hoping like Microcenter gets a truck tomorrow or something, but I'd have to scramble to get to Microcenter in the morning. And I don't really feel like doing that. The problem with Microcenter is like Microcenter will have a bunch of AMD reference cards at launch, but then after that, there's literally like a long period of them having nothing AMD until like the AIB cards start showing up, and it'll only be like, you know, they'll get like 2 Power Color Red Devils and like 1 MSI or 1 Gigabyte, and they'll just get like 3 at random within a 5-day period. So it's just gonna be really, really annoying. Do you think the price of the 4080 will go down around the same time? I don't think so, because, I mean, yeah, a lot of the tech media has complained about the price, but I think Nvidia doesn't see enough incentive to drop the price just because people like Jay from Jay's 2 Cents or Steve from Gamers Nexus complain. I feel like Nvidia is so high and mighty that they don't really care. Like, they're going to see the fact that people are still buying it, while also they're watching the 30 series slowly vanish. So basically everything is going according to plan. Like, I can see them adjusting the price on the 4080 like a couple months from now when the 30 series inventory has gotten low enough. But in reality, they don't need to do that, because they're going to release the 4070 Ti. They're going to release the 4060, the 4070, maybe a 4060 Ti. Over the course of next year, you're going to see a lot of like these newer Ada GPUs come in and replace their Ampere counterparts. So I really don't think Nvidia needs to lower the price. Like, do I want them to lower the price? Yes. But from a business standpoint, like, I'm just kind of picturing myself if I worked at Nvidia and if I was like in the board of directors. Like, let's say I was the chief financial officer, right? Like, yes, it's not selling as fast as the 3080 did at launch, but the fact that you're still having to get queued up into a Best Buy queue if you want the Founders Edition, or the fact that if you go typically look at Micro Center and other places, they're still sold out. Yes, they're still in stock in like places like Taiwan, but you know, that's Taiwan. Like, that market just might be different. So I don't know. I don't think they need, honestly, I don't think they need to lower the price. Even though I want them to, I just realistically, they don't need to. Enough people are spending that much money on the 4080 that it's still a success. In their mind, it's still a success. You don't think there will be even a No, I think there will be. There will be. There'll have to be one for mobile, at least. There'll have to be a 4050 for mobile. But it probably won't show up until like Q3, 4 of next year. Here's what I think is going to happen. So, well, I mean, let me finish this. But I think I think what's going to end up happening what's going to happen next year, so we'll just kind of go down now to what's going to happen, is AMD Radeon 7800 XT and 7800, whatever they call the second one. I don't know what they're going to call it, but I'm just going to use this as a placeholder name. This, I'm going to go ahead and say, without having any knowledge of any sort of insider leaks, I'm going to say March 2023. And I'll give reasonings why I believe this is going to be when these things come out in a little bit. So NVIDIA, obviously, we already know. Well, I guess we should put this one first because it's coming out first. NVIDIA RTX 4070 Ti. This is going to be January. And then I think this is going to be March. And then after that, there's going to be the NVIDIA RTX 4060. I don't know if it's going to be the Ti or 40. I don't know. I'm just going to say placeholder here. This is probably going to be April. This is going to be a response to this. This is probably going to be on par with the 7900 XT. So then this is going to be lower than that. So then NVIDIA's going to have to match this with something. So maybe like a 4070 and or this. And then one of these, we'll just say this, I guess. And then like that. May, June, somewhere around there is going to be this guy. So I'm completely pulling this stuff out of the air. So like, but I'm just making these assumptions right now, and we'll see how accurate I am with my own random like Greymon type leaks that I'm just coming up with out of thin air. But I'm gonna give you guys context as to why I really believe this one. I believe this one almost 100%. This one is pretty much 100% because we already kind of know that. But you know, these, I don't know. 4070 will be 3080. 4070 Ti is around 3090 Ti. Yeah, which kind of puts it like right underneath the 7900 XT. Well, in some games, I think the 4070 Ti will beat the 3090 Ti. And that will put it like on par with the 7900 XT. So, yeah, I kind of think this is the release schedule. I wouldn't be surprised. Now, AMD has to put out another card. That's probably going to be like in July or something. Or maybe June. The 7700 XT will probably be around June. Maybe May. It might actually be the same time as NVIDIA. I don't know. Who knows? Like, these are kind of up in the air. So the AMD ones are very easy to predict. Because basically all you do is you add 3 months. So it's like, where are we? We're in December. So add 3 months. That puts us at March. That's going to be these. Then add 3 more months. That puts you around June. That's going to be that one. That's how you do the AMD releases. Once you know the release of the top tier one, then you can easily derive when the other ones are going to show up. Now the NVIDIA one, it's kind of random because once you know the big NVIDIA launch, NVIDIA is very, very unpredictable. Like, they're way more dynamic in the way they release products. I feel like if they put something out there and there's like nothing else that can compete with it, then they can do whatever they want. So, like, for example, do you guys remember the GTX 980 and GTX 970? Do you remember these GPUs? When these GPUs came out, there was no response from AMD. The only thing that AMD put out that year was the Tonga. The R9, or the, was it that year? Yeah, the R9 285. This was like the only GPU that AMD put out, and this wasn't even like on the same level as either of these. This was weaker than both of them. So what NVIDIA did was NVIDIA literally sat on the sales of the 970 for like an entire quarter, and then later on, like, so this was like August of 2014, and then like you didn't get the GTX 960 until next year. Like, the GTX 960 was like, I think, like January of 2015. It was like way, way after these two. Because AMD didn't do anything. So NVIDIA just literally sat around and forced people to buy the $350 970. And then they launched their $250 whatever. Or $270, whatever this thing was. Like, way later on. 390 was... that was 2015. That was later. Yes, it was way later, 2015. It was right before Fury X. So yeah. So this is the reason why NVIDIA is so much harder to predict. Like I told you, like, AMD is very, very easy to predict their cadence. You look at when they launch their biggest product. Basically, the way I see AMD is like follow the Tahiti release. Follow the Tahiti release, and then you will learn the truth. So we have to go look at the Tahiti 7970. 7970 was December 22nd of 2011. Okay, that was 2011. Well, okay, realistically, it went on sale in January 9th. So this would be like our December 8th. Wasn't it the 8th? Yeah. This would be like our December 8th of the 7900 XTX. So January. So then I'm going to guess that Pitcairn, aka the 7870 and the 7850 are going to be in March. I don't remember, but let's find out. So 70... Well, actually, let's look at 7950. 7950 was January 31st. Okay, so then there's this one. So here's Pitcairn. Oh, look, March 5th, 2012. So I was right. So basically, you add like 3 months, roughly. Yes, it was. It was on par with the 970. The R9 290X was like a 780 Ti, and the 780 Ti was on par with the 970. So this is March of 2012 was when they launched their 800 one. So that's the reason why I'm saying March 2023 is the realistic estimate for the 7800 XT. It seems like that's a realistic estimate. And then if we look at the later one, so I'm trying to think, like the one after this was the 7770 or the 7850 launched alongside it, so that you have the same one. And then was the 7770. This one. Okay, that one actually came earlier, so now I'm not sure. But this one is like way cheaper. Like this, I think the MSRP on this was like 100 something. 159. So this was like a completely different thing. So just kind of ignore that one. Because they did launch the 7790 in 2013. This was their first, I think, this is Bonaire. Okay, this was Bonaire. They reused this one multiple times. This one got rebranded as the R7 260X, I believe. But that was going to be March 2013. See, that was like a whole year after the 7870. So, man, these numbering, this is so inconsistent with their numbering. Like, the one thing I think AMD needs to do a better job when it comes to naming their products. Like, 7790 is better than 7770. But obviously it's going to be weaker than the 7870. So, but you have a 90 here, so it's just going to confuse people. So I don't know. Their naming convention needs a lot of work. I mean, it still needs work. I still don't like what they've done with the whole like bringing back XTX into the consumer space. Like they shouldn't expose this to the consumer. This should literally be called the 7900 XT, and then what is the 7900 XT should be called either the 7900 or it should be called the 7800 XT. So I really don't like what they've done with their naming. Like, it's just so confusing. At least NVIDIA, as much as NVIDIA has just annoyed me this whole year with their pricing and on everything, and just their tactics seem so kind of like, I don't know, just kind of like definitely borderline anti-consumer with launching stuff like this and then like immediately launching like this in the second half of the year. And then just trying to screw the market over by pricing it so high. But, yeah. And I just realized that no one could see what I was talking about because I was showing paint the whole time. What I meant to show was this. This is what I was looking at. So what I was talking about earlier was March... Now I gotta go back. Here we go. March 5th, 2012 was the launch of their 7850 and their 7870 gigahertz edition. So these were March, right? And their flagship was this guy, the 7970, December of 2011. So there you go. This one was December, and then the 800 stuff was in March. So it's kind of the same deal this time around. So that's why it's kind of easy to predict AMD's launch schedule compared to Nvidia. CD Projekt Red literally removed HBAO from The Witcher so that it looked like crap without ray tracing. Wait, what? So the new Witcher update doesn't have HBAO anymore? I didn't know that. So there's no way to run it in like the old mode? Like with the old set does it have not HBAO, does it have the other one SBAO or SSAO? Oh. You know what? I feel like more games need to add like what is the other one? There's the voxel one. Is it VXBO or VABO, and then there's also HDAO. HDAO is like very very rare these days, but like HDAO is AMD's HBAO. One of the like probably the only game that I can think of in recent history that uses HDAO is Devil May Cry 5. Which is interesting because Devil May Cry 5 uses the same RE engine as the Resident Evil games, but for some reason the Resident Evil games don't have HDAO, but Devil May Cry 5 does have HDAO. VXAO, yeah. Yeah, VXAO didn't like one of the Tomb Raider, Rise of the Tomb Raider, or maybe it was the first Tomb Raider reboot, has VXAO, I forget. Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, there's a little bit of a delay in the chat, but yeah. Rise of the Tomb Raider. VXAO. Yeah, yeah. So basically, we can expect the 4070 Ti next in January, or maybe early. Like they'll probably announce it CES, and then it launches like end of the month, end of January, or like start of February. And then from AMD's side, there's going to be nothing until March. I'm pretty sure there's going to be nothing until March. We might hear about the 3D V-Cache, but I don't expect 3D V-Cache on AM5 until like May. So those who are holding out for that are going to be holding out for a while. Wow, this thing is as fast as a 1050 Ti. What's funny is today the HD 7970 is actually faster than it's definitely faster than the 680. In fact, it's actually on par with the 780, which is really really weird. I found that out because I did a video on the HD 7970. It was a should you upgrade video. I did this back in the summer, or maybe it was back in the spring. But it was several months ago, and what I found from my testing was that this GPU actually now performs like a GTX 780, which is surprising considering the original relative performance. The 780 is 25%, supposed to be 25% faster. But the thing is, both cards have a 3 gigabyte frame buffer, and both of them have a 384-bit bus. So it does show you that like AMD's fine wine, for some reason, aged over the course of 10 years and like somehow made it gain 25% performance over the course of 10 years. So I guess there's some truth to that statement. If you're willing to keep your GPU for a decade, you might get an extra 25% out of it. How relevant that will be, who knows? Yeah, no, I know it's the unlaunched 4080. Yeah, you're right. Although I do think the 3060 Ti launched first before the 3060 actually launched. I'm pretty sure. So 3060 Ti was December 1st of 2020 or December 2nd, 2020, and then the 3060 was February 25th of 2021. So yeah, the 3060 actually launched before the 3060. Or if I said 3060, I meant 3060 Ti launched before the 3060. The Vega 64 also outperforms. Yeah, I mean, yeah. You know what? Honestly, when I made that rasterization review video well, this goes back to when I did the Arc video. Like when I reviewed Arc, I tested Vega 64 and the GTX 1080, and I was actually surprised to see Vega 64 actually scaled a lot better over time with these modern games compared to the old GTX 1080. But it's kind of this. It's because the Vega 64 just has more brute force horsepower. It's just, like, what is it, like a 512-bit memory bus or like, no, it's like a 2040. It's a really weird architecture. It's got the whole HBM thing. Yeah, 2048-bit memory bus, but the memory it's clocked way lower, but it's like the proximity of it to the processor is so close, it being right here. So this is a really weird GPU. Although you gotta admit, like, this and the Fury before it were the predecessor. This is how AMD came up with the interposer technology, which is what they're now doing with chiplets. So this technology was applied to Ryzen in Zen 2 and Zen 3 and now Zen 4, and then it was also applied to the recent Radeon 7000 series. So in the form of those MCDs, instead of HBM, now they just put MCDs here, and then like the traditional GDDR6 is where it always was. Yeah, I do think the Arc A770 will gain a lot too. I don't think it'll take them a decade though to gain 25%. The way the 7970 apparently gained 25% over the course of 10 years. Arc has a similar, well, maybe 11 years, but it has a similar core count to Vega. Yeah, I know. It's got a lot of hardware. Like, Arc's got a ton of... Arc is built more like a 3070 and a 6700 XT competitor. I mean, and that's why, how, like, all the reviewers compared it with the 6600 XT and the 3060, which is the correct comparison because they're comparing it on price. If Intel priced Arc at their original price, because I really think they wanted to sell that thing for like $449 was their target MSRP, but they had to drop it by $100 because it didn't meet the performance, the performance estimate that they wanted to achieve, or that it didn't meet the performance goal, so they were forced to lower the price. So, but yeah, I think Arc will see some decent gains over the next year and a half. My only fear is that what I wonder is, I'm pretty sure we're not going to see any new GPUs from Intel, at least any high-end GPUs from Intel in 2023. It's basically just going to be the Arc A770 and the A750 pretty much all throughout 2023. So it's really going to be dependent on drivers. And I think what they're going to do is they're going to take their learning from the drivers in Arc over the course of this year or this upcoming year to determine how the Battlemage GPU is going to end up. Because I do think that Battlemage is 2024. I don't think it's going to be this year or 2023. You ran Black Ops 3 with DirectX, to the Vulkan translator, and you were getting 1440p max settings. Wow. Wow. Yeah. See, my only thing is when I looked into that, I don't have a whole lot of games that do Vulkan. I mean, I still need to do that. I still need to do that. But what I really have been waiting on from Intel, I've been waiting for them to release a driver that gives me an actual control panel window and not just an overlay. I can't stand their overlay, and I'm not gonna really. I don't really want to spend time retesting Arc until I get a control panel that is an actual window, and they clean up a lot of the weird UI bugs that still exist. Like, you know, if you bring up the overlay, if you click somewhere on your second monitor, don't close out the overlay on me instantly. Like, that's super annoying. Then I have to right-click again and bring it up again. And then sometimes, because I use 3 monitors, sometimes I try to bring up the Arc control panel, and, like, it brings it up on the far left monitor for some reason. And then if I try to move my mouse over to click on something, it doesn't register. Like, let's say I try to click on the AV1 encoding dropdown, it doesn't register the mouse click because it's almost like the overlay is, it thinks it's on the middle monitor, but it's actually displaying on my left monitor. So when I click on the left monitor on where it's showing up, it doesn't do anything. So then I go and click on the middle monitor where it thinks it is, but because it's not rendered there, it like closes out on me like it normally does when you click anywhere on the screen. So it's very, very annoying. Like, I can't stand those sort of UI issues, and that's kind of a deal breaker for me. So until they fix the UI or redo that whole thing, I'm just not going to retest Arc. And there's not a whole lot of other content I can do on it other than kind of showing, like, okay, here's AV1, here's a video recorded in AV1. You know, here's a side-by-side comparison. I feel like people have already done those videos, so at this point that would just be really redundant. Do you think the Founders Edition 40 series cards are the only ones worth buying since they perform the same? Yes. I personally wouldn't buy an A... Well, I said it before, like, the only AIB NVIDIA cards I would get are the ones at MSRP. So, like, for example, if we go to Microcenter, there's a Zotac that they have, or they had, somewhere. Like this one. Like, I would buy this. I would get this one. Like, this is good. It's the 3-finger on the case mount, so it's not going to sag. So, see, it's got, like, the 3 fingers, so that's really good. This is one that I could see myself getting, and it's at MSRP. It's not like, it's not a cent more. Triple fan. It's really big, so it's going to be quiet. This is one that I would get. Like, if I wasn't going to get the FE, this is the one that I would get. And I think I said this like in the stream that I did when the 4080 was launching. And I still stand by that. So I would get this. It's either going to be for me, it would be the FE or this, with a preference for the FE. Like, FE's like first top pick, this is like second backup. The PNY would also be decent because it's also at the same MSRP. I just don't like the look of this one. The Zotac one just looks better to me. I like that rounded design. It just looks like, I don't know. It looks like looks like a basketball shoe or something. I don't know. Like this just, or like a track shoe. Like, this looks cool. So I'd get that one. You did order the FE. I wouldn't worry too much about it. I think it will, but it won't be a lot. You got to think about it like this. Does NVIDIA need to drop the price? I don't think so. Like, if you go up to Newegg, like, this is the reason why they don't need to drop the price. Okay, these are actually in stock. But earlier in the week, I saw some of these listings were out of stock, so that means they just restocked sometime in the middle of this week. But I don't think they need to, because like this one has 10 reviews, this one has 11 reviews. This one has 47 reviews. #1 best seller, and it's a gigabyte of all things. It's a gigabyte graphics card that's the best seller. This tells you there's a lot of people who really don't know. I don't know. I'm not going to say anything more. It's cool. Gigabyte, you're cool. I've never owned your graphics cards, so I can't really comment too much. But I've heard a lot of bad things about them, so I'm just saying. But yeah, I don't know. Like this is too much money. But you know, I don't. This is way too much money. But I don't think they need to. If enough people are buying them, they don't need to do it. I mean, back when the pandemic was happening and you know, graphics cards were going for like $2,000 on 3080s were going for $2,000 on eBay by scalpers. They did not lower the price when people had to pay that much money to get a graphics card. But yeah, I think the fact that these are still in stock is two things. One is the price, and two is because people are probably buying this thing, which is terrible value by today's standards. But I have a feeling a lot of people are buying 3070 Ti's. And I don't know why they'd be buying them at these prices. These are terrible prices, and that looks like the weirdest name. Man, these are terrible prices. Like, what? Apparently people are buying these, though. Because the fact that these are still above MSRP and... Oh, well, these are all open box. So, okay, I guess they're drying up. I guess we're starting to dry up. Yeah, out of stock. But see, this is what I'm saying. Like, I think people are buying 3070 Ti's. They can't find the 3080 anymore. So they're probably settling for the 3070 Ti. You're upgrading from a 3070 Ti to a 4080. I wouldn't have if I was on a 3090, though. So these are all kind of like open box. So yeah, see, like the 3080 is pretty much gone. Like whoever is dumb enough to pay this much money for a 3080 clearly doesn't get the memo on, well, these are all open box. So I guess people have already paid these stupid prices for this graphics card that isn't even that good anymore. I mean, it's still good, but it's not like $800 or $900 good. So there's like way better options. For one thing, like this, if this was not open box and this was actually legitimate, like 939 for a 3080, like this makes that AMD 7900 XT look like such good value. This just makes the AMD card look like really good value when everybody was hating on that card's price at $899. This just looks terrible. I don't know about that. I kind of think the 4070 Ti might be $800. I think it's going to be $799 or $699. It's going to be one of those two. Because, see, the thing is, this is what I think has happened. So, remember, NVIDIA originally wanted to launch we'll just say 4070 Ti so it doesn't confuse people. I'm not gonna use its original name. They were originally going to launch the 4070 Ti at $899. So, basically, at $900. But by unlaunching it, what they have effectively done is they have forced people who were waiting on it to go ahead and basically they forced them into an upsell scenario. Like, because the people that were going to buy the 4080 12 gig, or aka 4070 Ti, they, in their minds, they wanted to buy 40 series. They wanted to buy into DLSS 3, the future of that technology. They wanted the better ray tracing, regardless of whether or not they would actually utilize it or whatever. They just they bought into that stuff, right? They were ready to buy the 4080 12 gig because it was under $1,000. So when NVIDIA unlaunched it, because the media and everybody said, oh, that's way too much money, and the card's way too different from the true 4080, now that forced those buyers, typical NVIDIA fanboys who wanted the affordable 4080, to now have to be forced to pay more money, aka $1,200 or more for the AIBs, of a 4080. Or fork out even more money than they were originally planning to spend for a 4090 and try to hunt one of those down and battle it out with scalpers. So, see, like, that's kind of the way I see it. The alternative is for people who were disappointed because they unlaunched the product. Some of them probably decided to go and buy a 3080 or, just wait it out, until the 4070 Ti, which is probably the smarter thing to do because those guys are probably going to get a better deal now because of that. You don't care about DLSS 3. You bought the 4080 since I like ray tracing and I still like DLSS 2.4. Okay. Well, yeah, I know you like ray tracing because you're probably like the number one viewer on my channel that talks to me about ray tracing. So I know you're big on ray tracing. So I think ray tracing is cool, but it's definitely not like my top priority when I choose a GPU. To me, it's one of those nice to haves. Like, I don't play the type of games. I mean, you've seen the type of games that I typically play on the channel. Usually I'll be playing like Genshin Impact dailies, or maybe some of these other single player RPGs. I used to play a lot of Final Fantasy XIV. Obviously, that doesn't have any ray tracing. So it's like most of my Steam library, like Elden Ring, Neo 2. Scarlet Nexus, Star Ocean, the Star Wars game, and then there's like a bunch of other things like Resident Evil, and that's not really like high-end ray tracing by any means. Horizon, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, like none of these games that I have are really big on ray tracing, so that kind of shows that I don't really put too much into ray tracing. I don't play Minecraft. I don't play a lot of like first-person shooters like Battlefield, which does feature ray tracing. I know like Fortnite also has ray tracing. I don't even play Fortnite, so used to play League of Legends, but not really. But that's not even relevant either. So when I test the Intel, oh, did I not test Elden Ring on that review? I guess I didn't. Yeah, I don't think I did. I know I did it for the 7900. Yeah. Because I know for next year, I gotta bring up my list of anticipated games for next year. Because I made a list of games that I'm actually interested in playing. Well, I don't know where it is right now. Hold on. So I think one of them is, well, if we go here. So, Wolong Fallen Dynasty. So this is a game, this is probably one of my most anticipated games for next year. So this one is March 3rd of next year. So it's coming soon. That's going to be the next big, like, Elden Ring type game that's not actually Elden Ring. So it's going to be really, really hard. Like, the combat focus is very, very hard. It's basically made by the same people who made Neo and Ninja Gaiden, Team Ninja. So, going to be a very, very hard game. I've already played the free demo. There was a timed demo on the PlayStation 5. So, I've played through it. And yeah, after playing that demo, man, I can't wait to play this game. So this is the type of game that I would play. Whether or not this has ray tracing, I highly doubt it'll have ray tracing. It might have DLSS 2 and FSR 2. Because I think Neo 2 and Stranger of Paradise both, well, one of them has FSR and the other one has DLSS. I think Neo has DLSS and Stranger of Paradise has FSR 2. So I expect this game will either have one or both of those features. If you like Ghost of Tsushima, I haven't finished Ghost of Tsushima. I have the Director's Cut edition on the PlayStation 5. I just haven't finished it. I haven't really played too much of it either. Ghost of Tsushima is good, but it's like the thing with Ghost of Tsushima is it's a much slower type of action game. It's like a slower paced action role playing game, whereas games like Wolong, Fallen Dynasty, and Neo are just almost instant, constant action. Like, you're always on your toes. It's very much like playing Elden Ring, only probably even more, like the world of Wolong and Neo is more hostile than the world of Elden Ring. The difference is Elden Ring enemies are spaced further away from you, or they're further apart from each other. Although there are areas where there's packs of enemies, which can be quite challenging. But this game, it's like if you this game you have to move way faster. So it's like the combat, the tempo of combat in Wolong is way faster than Elden Ring. Like Elden Ring is a lot slower by comparison, and then like Monster Hunter is even slower than Elden Ring in my mind. Where Winds Meet. Is that? I think that's one of those Chinese game, like the Chinese development game. Because this one's made by an actual, like a well-known Japanese developer. Even though it's about like ancient China is the setting. So this one I know will be good. The ones from the Chinese developers, because I don't know when those will show up. Like those games are, like the Chinese development studios are kind of unpredictable in terms of when their games actually release. Yeah, no, Elden Ring is not an easy game. I never said it was an easy game, but like in terms of the combat, like the speed, the tempo of combat, this game, Wolong, is faster than Elden Ring. I mean, I'm just speaking off of my experience playing the demo. It was a timed demo that was available for like, there was a weekend back in October when you could log into PlayStation and download the demo and play it for like, I think it was 3 days or 4 days it was up, and then they took it offline. But yeah, and it has co-op, just like Elden Ring. You can summon other players into your world to help you, or you could co-op with others. Like I got summoned into a bunch of other people's worlds to help them out with clear the tutorial boss or whatever the boss was in the first level. But yeah, this game is really, really fun. So I can't wait, because this game is basically like, if you like kung fu, like traditional, like old school Jet Li, Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, those type of like action, Hong Kong like action movies, this game is gonna have like that kind of action, like flashy martial arts action with like the difficulty of Elden Ring. So if those two things interest you, then yeah, this game should definitely be on your radar. Lost Soul is also crazy fast. Yeah, that's another one too. That's another one that's similar like From Software inspired type combat system. But yeah, this was probably the first one that comes to my mind. Like there was another one, obviously. Final Fantasy 16. This one is probably my most anticipated game of next year. Final Fantasy 16. So this one I will definitely be playing day one. Now the thing is, I do think that the PC one, I don't know if the PC one, I think the PlayStation 5 is like a 6-month exclusive or something, just like with what happened with Final Fantasy 7. So that's a little unfortunate, but yeah, I'll be playing it on PlayStation 5 regardless of whatever ends up happening. If there's some kind of exclusivity deal or timed exclusive deal, I'm still going to be playing it on whichever platform is available. If the PC is available in June, I'll be playing it on the PC. If not, I'll be playing it on the PlayStation 5. It doesn't really matter. But it's just too much of an anticipated game. I'm not going to wait out just because it's console exclusive. I'll be playing it on console. Like that's how big of a deal this game is to me. So I'm willing to make that exception. But I don't really make that exception all the time. But yeah, this is definitely one of those games that I will do that. So 16, which interestingly enough, the combat in this game, I don't want to say it's like Elden Ring. It's more like Devil May Cry. Like this one seems more like it's going to be like Nier Automata, Devil May Cry, Bayonetta. It's more like that is kind of the vibes that I'm getting from the combat system in this game. But this one's going to be good. And then I think the other one, like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is going to be way later on in the year. This will be like basically a year from now. This is probably going to be November or December of next year. So, long time from now to wait. But this is another one. It's not the most anticipated game because it's just such a long wait. But yeah, like, if the thing is, if this ends up being on PlayStation 5, like, if this is a timed exclusive, I don't know, because honestly, I still haven't finished, like, the part 1. I still have to finish Final Fantasy VII Remake. So, and yeah, like, the fact that I never did that, or I haven't finished it yet, tells me that if this ends up being, like, PlayStation exclusive for, like, 6 months, then I probably won't even play this until 2024, or whenever it's out on the PC. Who knows? I don't know. Like, I have a feeling if it's going to be console exclusive, I probably won't play it when it's initially released. It kind of depends on, like, what other games will be out around the same time. But, like, this is one. There was another one. Oh, yeah, Hogwarts. Hogwarts Legacy is coming out early next year, so February. This is another one that I've been on the fence about. Like, this one looks really promising. Hogwarts Legacy. I wish they would show, like, the trailer of the actual game instead of some other game. Like, we already know all about The Witcher. We don't need to see more about The Witcher 3. Hogwarts Legacy, though, that looks good. So, that's going to be another one that's on my list. And that's February 7th, so that's actually coming out pretty soon. So 16, I'm just writing down the actual release date. I'm adding this to the list. The actual release date, since now they do show them. So 16. Wolong is March. That's the 3rd. Lost Soul. So you said Lost Soul? Oh, this game's already... Is this the one you're talking about? Or is it some other one? Also, Blue Protocol. Blue Protocol is an MMO that's supposed to come out next year, although we still don't really know when. But this is another game that I do want to play, but I don't know when it's coming out. Lost Soul aside. Oh, but yeah. Oh, you know what? I think I know which game you're talking about. I think I know what this is. Then you just skip this ad. But, we don't have a release date, though. Unreal Engine. What happened? Trailer messed up. I don't know what happened. Maybe because I'm not logged in. Maybe I'm not logged in, so it's like you have to... I have like an ad blocker or something that's saying you're not old enough to watch this or whatever. But anyway, yeah, that's kind of one of them. Hey, Joey. Yeah, I kind of think, like, for me, most of the games for next year that I'm interested in are either going to come out in the first part of the year and the very end of the year. Like, for me, there's only like one game in the middle of the year, and that's Final Fantasy 16. And then basically there's like nothing else on my radar. Which is kind of like this. Well, this year there was really nothing in the middle of the year in my mind. Like, we had Elden Ring and Horizon Forbidden West in the early part of the year, so February. That was literally Q1. And then there was like, what, nothing? Let me just go back through the calendar of this year. So, like, this year we literally had, or at least what I was tracking, was Horizon Forbidden West. That was February. Elden Ring was also February. Then there was Triangle Strategy, which I was interested in, but I never played it. That was like early March. Then there was Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin, which was March of this year. And I did play that. I beat it. Then we had literally nothing. Well, at least nothing that I was tracking until the Ryzen 7000 series launched in September. So, there was a game called Valkyrie Elysium, but that game didn't really look that impressive graphically. It looked very outdated by today's standards. So it was a little disappointing, but that was one that was on my list. And then we had ARC A770 and RTX 4090. It's funny how I've written like hardware launches next to like game launches. Then I wrote down Intel 13th Gen, Star Ocean, the Divine Force, and then Harvestella. And then we had like nothing until Crisis Core and Reunion and the RX 7900 XTX and XT launch. So those were the games that I was tracking. So for the upcoming year, the only games I'm tracking: Hogwarts Legacy, Wolong, Final Fantasy 16, and Final Fantasy 7 Reunion. There's probably some other ones that I'm leaving out, but I mean, those are the only ones that I've been tracking. So, Joey, just to like bring you up to speed, we were talking earlier about the Microcenter deals for those that were still looking for like a decent deal for the holiday. Like if they put off the shopping, or they still have like if they're still trying to like get a last minute gift or something, or whether it's a small upgrade for themselves at the end of the year, or for like for a family member or something, like a Christmas present. Basically, we're kind of looking at that. Newegg went up $100 on that card. Oh, you mean the Sapphire one? We were looking at graphics, so we weren't looking at the AMD cards. But I'll go back and look at it again. See, every time I see this product is temporarily out of stock, I feel like there was a drop where this became available, but then like it went out. Oh yeah, it did go up. This went up by $100. But you know what's funny? I never saw this. Not once did this ever come in stock. And I've been signed up to get notifications on when this comes in stock, and I've never gotten a single notification from Newegg of this product ever being available. So I don't know. Like every time I see this though, this makes me wonder, where it says this product is temporarily out of stock because of high demand. We will replenish it as soon as possible. That makes me feel like there was some of them that went up for sale, but then they instantly sold out. At this point, if I can't get that one, I'll just be happy if I can get a reference card at this point. Like, that's literally the only hardware product that's come out this year that I still want to try to obtain before the end of the year, if possible. Yeah. But yeah, this is the one that I wanted. Oh, it went up. It's now the same price as an 4080 FE. Yeah, there hasn't really been many reviews on this card, though. Like, Tech Power put up a review. I know they did one. Yeah. So they did one on it, and they said that it was really good. We just go skip till the end. Basically, they said that it's a big performance jump versus last generation. It's faster than the 4080 in rasterization. Very powerful cooler. Very quiet. 3 8-pin. We kind of know that it's the reference card's power limited, so the 3 8-pin removes the power limit issue. High power limit setting. So basically, it's dual BIOS. It's actually triple. Well, it's dual BIOS, but there's actually 3 switches. There's software controlled BIOS switching. There's silent BIOS, and there's like the OC BIOS. So it's got like 3 settings on the BIOS slider, so that's really good. Low temperature, excellent overclock potential, ray tracing performance improved. So basically, we're looking at like 3090 Ti ray tracing levels. Idle fan stop, beautiful design, 24 gigs of RAM. So basically, same amount of memory as a 4090 and a 3090 Ti and a 3090. Backplate included, no 16-pin required. That's good. More compact than a 4080. That's really weird because I would have thought that they were the same size, because the FE's basically the same thickness as the 4090. Support for DisplayPort 2.1 and HDMI 2.1. That's actually really good. AV1's in there. The dual encode thing, 5 nanometer, world's first chiplet. So yeah. You know, Bang for Buck on YouTube has the Banned for Buck. Yeah. The guy who does a lot of the benchmark videos, or him just like showing the results from RivaTuner. Yeah, I saw his videos, but I want to get like a review from like somebody who has a lot to say about it, because all he does is kind of just show the card, right? Like he doesn't really say much. He just shows like the performance, which is good, but I kind of want to know like what, like, is there a lot of coil whine? Is there like, what is the fan RPM in the OC BIOS mode versus the stock mode? I don't know if Tech PowerUp does that. Maybe they do. But it says like the negatives $100 over. Well, now Newegg's $200 over. Considerably lower ray tracing performance than 4080. To me, I don't care about this. Large increase in power consumption over reference design. Yeah, we already kind of know because it's 3 8-pin. Quad slot might block slot width. Yeah, this is an interesting one. So this is one that is typically a problem for older motherboards where there's an X1 slot that gets covered up, or maybe the X8 slot might end up like right next to the fan of this card. But honestly, like with the Gigabyte motherboard that I have, like the Aorus Master, the nice thing about the Gigabyte motherboards is they're placed so well, like you won't ever have a problem with the spacing. Like, the cool thing about the Gigabyte motherboards, and it's not just the one that I have, it's pretty much like all of them. Like if you look at this, I like what they've done with this layout, because it's almost like they knew ahead of time that they were going to have a lot of thick graphics cards that were going to be 3 and quad slots. So you can see, even with a 4090 Strix, or even with that Sapphire Nitro, like these two slots are still far enough down that that'll never be a problem. Like that card is probably going to come up to like right here. It's 1, 2, 3, and then it extends to like almost 4. So it'll be about here. So you still have a lot of space for your capture card or whatever you have down in here. So, Tasty PC made a decent video. I haven't watched her video on that at all. Like I haven't watched any of her videos in a very, very long time. But she mostly covers Asus, I think. Like I guess hers is like the Tough or the Strix or something. I'll probably have to go watch it. Like the reason why I didn't watch it because I think her video is on the Asus Tough, and I don't ever plan on buying the Asus Tough, so that's why. I would have watched it if it was the Sapphire, or if it was the Red Devil, or if it was the reference card. But because it's the Asus card, I don't really care. But I'll probably go look at it anyway just to see how the Asus card compares. I know the Tough card did review well by Tech PowerUp. Like the Tough was really, really quiet, and it overclocked pretty well. But like this, I think if we go back to where is it? Temperatures and fan noise. So see, this thing, silent mode is going to be like 1479 RPM, 31 dBA. Like this is already super quiet. So this, yeah, that's like quieter than the Merc. The XFX is louder. The Tough is, so the Tough quiet is even quieter than this. But your hotspot's at 86C, so it's like that's the difference. Ancient Gameplays has the reference. Yeah, I already watched his video on the reference, but I really want to see more like AIB cards, like this one. I want to see reviews on this that are video reviews. I want to see like the Merc. There was one video from the guy in the UK, OC3D or something. He did one on the Merc. But, you know, the problem with the Merc is I'll probably only ever run it in the default BIOS because I'm not going to deal with 2,000 RPMs on the fan. That's too loud. So, like, the whole point of buying a AIB is for it to be quieter than the reference card. So this to me is kind of a deal breaker. So that's very disappointing on the Merc. But the tough is actually pretty impressive. Like that's almost like it's too quiet. Um, I'd rather have, you know, I'd rather have 1400 RPM at 72 on the hotspot versus like 86 hotspot and 1000 RPM. Although this is extremely quiet though. The tough, I'd run in the default BIOS. Like this would be default BIOS. The Sapphire one, I feel like these are so close together. Although this is weird because the hotspot is. Oh, I see. So what this means is the Nitro's default BIOS is the OC BIOS, and the second BIOS is the quiet mode. But what's weird is the quiet mode has a low. Maybe that's I don't know. That's weird. The fan. That's kind of strange. They're both relatively quiet. I mean, both BIOSes on this card are around 1500 RPM. So, which is a decent level. Like, for me, anything up to like 1800 is okay. Anything above 2000 RPMs is when I start thinking like I should have just bought a reference card if it's gonna run that. If the fan's gonna spin up that fast. Because the fans on the XT reference that I have, they do get up to 2000 RPMs on the stock fan profile. It typically runs between 1700 to 2000 RPM. Like that's kind of the average RPM speed on the reference card, or of the XT, not the XTX. Like I don't remember what the XTX one was. But I would assume that it's louder. So, but see, just by looking at this, 31 dBA versus 39 on the reference, I can already tell this is going to be quieter. Not as quiet as the 6900 XT, but this thing has a much lower hotspot temperature. The hotspot temperature on the 6900 XT can reach 90 Celsius on the stock fan profile on the reference card. And I know how the 3090 Ti sounds at full load, and it has this weird. It's not like it's super loud, but it is noticeable, and it's like a low. It's like a low hum, like a low type of fan hum to it on the 3090 Ti, and that's where you're getting that 42 dBA number. Do I work in the IT field? Yes, I do. I'm definitely more on the enterprise server side. I wish I could do something more like on the consumer-facing side of tech. Like, for example, like, you know, if I was dealing with graphics cards or architecture on like the CPU side, that would be the ideal type of job for me, at least in my mind. But I'm more like on the server side. So think of like EPYC processors, Intel Xeons, and then network side. So like routers, switches, firewalls. That's the sort of stuff that I deal with on a daily basis. So not really this. I wish I would deal more with this stuff because I'm definitely way more interested in this stuff. But yeah, I mean, you can spin up a lot of like. You can do a lot of interesting things, right? Like most network equipment at its core is all Linux based. They all pretty much run the Linux OS, and then they run like their own operating system on top of it. Or Linux can spin up like a container VM, and you basically spawn whatever. If you're doing like a virtual appliance for a firewall, if you're gonna run like a firewall off of a server, you know, that would be one scenario. Aside from just buying an actual firewall and deploying an actual firewall and an actual router, as opposed to running both of them on a server. Because the server side can save money, but can also get really, really expensive very, very quick. And at that point, you're better off just buying an actual appliance, like an actual firewall, as opposed to a server for a firewall. But yeah, I think this is the one that I would get. At $1,200, though, I would still buy this at $1,200. It's basically the same as the 4080, but this is actually faster than a 4080. Like if we go back to the results, like let's look at the average. So yeah, so this is like 256 versus 250 at 1080p at 1442 211 versus 202, and then at 4K 132 versus 124. So it's typically faster. I mean, it's faster than the reference card by a little bit out of the box. But I feel like the difference between these two is the reference definitely hits a power ceiling much, much faster. So you can't really do much tweaking with it. I mean, you can try to undervolt. Like Ancient Gameplays did a pretty good video on the whole undervolting scalability for the reference card. But I feel like with the Nitro, this probably performs a lot better because you can literally raise the power limit plus 15 and then do the same undervolt that he was doing. But because you have a higher power limit, with the undervolt, you're probably going to hit better average frequencies. You're going to hit better average frequency peaks. And with a higher power limit, you're probably going to hold that higher frequency longer, for a longer duration than within the reference card. So yeah, I think this would be the one to get, in my mind. You still need 3 8-pins for the overclocking. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, with the 3 8-pins, when you raise the power slider to like plus 15%, you're not really power limited anymore. So yeah, your power draw is going to get closer to like 400 plus watts. But, that's how they were able to get that one number. Like, there was one, what was it, Cyberpunk or one of those games? Was it this one? No, there was a game where they overclocking. Was it overclocking? Yeah. Yeah, this is the screenshot that everybody puts on like Reddit and Twitter for the 7900 XTX. Like, this is the one screenshot that everybody likes to show off for some reason. But see, like 68 versus 70 to the 4090 in Cyberpunk 2077 with the overclock. So like, what did they do with this overclock? He did overclock plus undervolt. You're getting 21.5%. He said if you do stop, so the reference XTX was 8% faster than the 4080. The stock Nitro Plus is 12% faster. If you add the overclock plus the undervolt on top, you're getting 21.5%. This looks much closer now to what AMD has promised us. Yeah, but that's kind of irrelevant because the 4090 is $1,600 plus, right? So the point is, we're looking at like what can you do with a lower priced graphics card? The fun of it is how close can you get a lower priced product to meet the performance of a much more expensive product. But see, so Unigen, but see that this is the canned benchmark. So, what did they do here? 22 default clock boost. He put the boost to 3200. I don't know. When people say that the overclocking on AMD is different from NVIDIA, I disagree. I think they overclock the exact same way. Like, you literally have 3 sliders that you can play around with. I don't understand why people think that it's different to overclock. The cards might behave a little bit differently, but you still only do the exact same things. Like, you raise power, you raise your memory clock or your GPU clock, and that's basically it. You have like 3 sliders, and I guess you can change your voltage. I guess the 4th slider will be the voltage slider, and that's where the whole undervolting thing comes in. But realistically, undervolting takes forever to stability test. So the reason why I don't really undervolt, because I've gotten a lot of comments on some of my videos, especially on like the i9 video that I did, where I talk about like how to tame the beast, basically how to make the 13900K not run at 100 Celsius while rendering videos in DaVinci Resolve. And I got a lot of comments in that video of people saying, why am I so against undervolting? Because literally in that video, what I show people in the BIOS is I go in and I enforce Intel's stock power limits instead of having the motherboard run it in unlimited power mode. And that fixes the temperature issue, mostly. It still runs hot, but it's a lot more manageable. It doesn't instantly overheat. And a lot of people were like, well, why don't you just undervolt it? And the thing is, if I'm going to put out a video and tell people, like, this is what you need to do if you don't want your processor to overheat on an air cooler, I can't guarantee, like, if I say you need to undervolt it and you need to put it at, like, 1.135 volts or whatever on the vCore, like, that might work for me, but that doesn't necessarily work for everyone else's i9 processor. So that's the reason why I don't like to just, like, put out a video and say, this is what you need to do if you don't want your processor to overheat. And then call it a day, because I know, like, there's going to be the edge case where people try that and then they'll play a game and they might, like, crash to desktop or hard freeze or black screen or blue screen, and that's because their undervolt's not stable, right? And obviously I'm not responsible for them doing that, but I don't like to put out a video and then have people do the thing that I say to do and then it doesn't work for them, right? Because that's the reason why I typically won't recommend undervolting for something. Now, that doesn't mean that people can't do undervolting. I just don't think that it's something that you can just say, okay, here, just copy my settings and you're good to go. That's not how it works when you undervolt. Undervolt is basically like overclocking. You have to stress test, and it's on a per individual processor case. Like, each one is going to be different. The whole silicon lottery applies, and but power limit is a completely different thing. Like, if I say the processor cannot exceed 250 watts, I key that into the BIOS, and that is the hard limit, and I know it will be stable because it won't go above 250 watts on the core, and that's it. Like, if the cooler can dissipate 250 watts of heat, then you're good and it's not going to overheat when you key in 250 watts as the max power draw. So that's the reason why, like, power limiting is an easy thing to just say, here, copy paste these settings, and now you're not going to overheat anymore. And I know that it's going to be stable because we're not messing with voltages. We're just enforcing the power limit, which is going to dynamically reduce the amount of current and the amount of voltage that the processor can pull. And that's not going to introduce stability problems because we haven't messed with the clock and we haven't messed with the actual vCore. So that's kind of my reasons why, like, I might do undervolting on my own, but I'm probably not going to just advertise, like, this is what you need to do. Now, having said all that, I still might do an overclocking video guide for not just this graphics card, if I can get one of these, but I'll probably revisit the processors in the future and do overclocking video on that, because I do think that there is a lot of interest in that. I do want to cover Curve Optimizer. I've been meaning to cover that. I've just been really busy with this, the AMD product launch, and I did want to dedicate enough coverage to the Radeon cards. I mean, unfortunately, I still don't have the XTX card, which is kind of annoying because that's the one where I did have a list of videos that I had planned to make for that. But I ended up just pivoting and making a bunch of those instead for the XT, which is fine, but that's not really the one that people are interested in. So, but the thing is, it works out because when people are, I guess, there's a lack of content on the XT, so the fact that I actually covered the XT, makes my video pretty relevant, I would say, because there's, like, not that much content on it. So that means my video doesn't get buried under, like, the mountain of other XTX reviews. So, but yeah, I think other than that though, like these were the deals. Like this is it. So it's like there's no graphics cards deals. Let me see. Do they still have the? Okay, you can still get the 2 free games. Yeah, so you can still get the Callisto Protocol and Dead Island 2 with the purchase of an AMD Radeon 6000 series graphics card. So that's still a pretty good deal. I can't recommend any 30 series cards because they're not priced properly. But unfortunately, those are basically all kind of drying up slowly. But yeah, the AMD ones, like the XTX, if you can find one, it's really good value relative to Nvidia and relative to the XT. But if you can't get one of these and you get the XT and you're on a 1440p monitor, the reality is like you'll be fine. Like this is good enough. This is such a huge amount of performance at 1440p that even though it's less optimal price-wise, it's still cheaper and it's still way good performance for 1440p. So yeah, let's look at Newegg. Well, like what other deals does Newegg have? Dealcember. Components. Oh, I don't know. Is that a good deal? I guess. But, I mean, Microcenter gives free memory, but I understand like not everybody lives near a Microcenter, so that might not be for everyone. This 140. I mean, there's like a promo code there. 140 for 32 gigs of DDR5 5600. Man, this just makes me feel glad that I live near a Microcenter. Just when I see stuff like this, like, okay, 140 for 32 gigs of DDR5 5600. I mean, you know, you could get, for $100 more, you could get a Ryzen 5 7600X with better memory. So it's like, I don't know. I don't know. If you just need memory, though, like, that's fine, I guess. And I like the Vengeance RAM from Corsair because it's low profile, so I know, like, if you have a big Noctua air cooler, this will fit without any issues with the cooler. 3050 for $300. That to me just doesn't sound like a good deal at all. Like, I don't even know why that's on the list. I don't know why that's there. Deep Cool. This looks like it's a pretty good deal. 55 for a dual fin stack. Like, this is pretty good. This air cooler is on par with the Noctua NHD 15. So I would say this one's pretty good. For 55, considering the Noctua is like $100, this is pretty good. Yeah, this is a pretty good deal. The Deep Cool, 6 heat pipes, dual fin stack, dual fans. This one's a good one. And you know me, I like air coolers. I don't run anything on liquid. So for 24/7 peace of mind, you don't have to worry about leaks. You don't have to worry about the reservoir. You don't have to worry about the pump going bad. Especially if you've had the pump for like 5 years. I still have some old all-in-one liquid coolers that I haven't used in like 7 years or so. And I have no idea if they still have any water in them. Yeah, I still got like, I have a Corsair, and I think I have the AMD FX 8150s water cooler, and I haven't used the AMD one in like basically since Ryzen. And then the other one, the Corsair, was on my Intel i7 4770K until I got the Noctua NHD 15 and I went from liquid to air and found that the air cooler was way better. So it's like, yeah, I haven't gone back since then. That's a good deal, though. That's a really good one. Server chassis from Roseville. So Roseville is Newegg's house brand, for those who didn't know. So this is a chassis. This is a rack mount server. So does this fit, like, how many, what I want to know is, like, how many drives does this fit if this is for storage? And if it's not for storage, how many GPUs can this thing fit? This looks like a 2RU. Yeah, that's a 2RU. So it's a 2 rack unit. You can see the screw holes there, so that's how you know how many rack units it is. That's not the only way, but you can kind of tell it's a 2 rack unit. The thing above it up there, that's like the top of rack switch. That thing is a 1RU. So yeah. This thing could probably fit like a Intel Xeon, like maybe dual Xeons. Or maybe this is probably a single. No, this is a single server. So this is like a single socket server. I don't even know what type of motherboard would fit in there though. Like that's EAT. Oh, this is for like a home. Yeah, this is a home server. The price is probably like $240 or something if I had to guess. Corsair Hydro. See, the thing about the water coolers, because I got a lot of comments on my video when I talked about using air to cool the AMD 7000 and the 13th gen. Like, it was one thing for me to claim to put an air cooler on this thing, which would actively go to 95C. But as soon as I put the exact same air cooler on this Intel processor and watched it go to 100 Celsius like within 1 second, I got a lot of comments asking me why I don't use water. The reality is if I put these processors on a liquid cooler, I would still have them see 95 Celsius. Steve from Hardware Unbox used a 360 radiator in his review for both the Intel 13th gen and the AMD Ryzen 7000 series processor, and they still overheated. Or they still hit their 95C, which is technically not overheating on the AMD, but then the Intel one did get up to like 98 or 97, somewhere around there, and then it went over 100 at some point. If you do a really, really long 10-minute render, it does hit at 100C. So bottom line is liquid doesn't help. You basically have to go with 360 as the minimum. And then even then, like, you're still going to be in the upper 80s, lower 90s. With that big of an air cooler. So it's literally like, if you want to have a controlled temp, you need a custom loop. Like, that's the reality. You got to go custom loop, and I can't be bothered to do that because I don't want to deal with all the flexible tubing. I don't want to deal with. I'm definitely not going to do hard tubing. I'm considering how often I change the components in my computer. So it's like, yeah, that's not going to be a thing for me. 4-port USB KVM switch. This is a KVM switch. See, this could be cool for like this could be cool for a lab or for like like an SMB back office. The KVM switch would come in handy. Like, this could come in handy. That's actually cool to see that many of them. I've seen ones that have had like 2 VGA and like maybe 4 USB, but not that many. That's cool. I guess that's a good deal. Like, typically this is the sort of thing that like a company would buy though. Like this, I don't know why someone would buy this as an individual unless they had like a home server and they just wanted like the KVM. The one nice thing about the NZXT H1 2 is that it's easy to take out the GPU compared to the main system. Oh, you mean the the custom? Is this that's this? Okay, I think I'm back. I actually lost power. So I was sitting here mid-sentence, And make sure this audio's
Okay,
working.
I think I'm back.
Okay, yeah, I was sitting here mid-sentence and then bam, everything went dark. I'm just sitting here in the dark. And I finished my sentence in the dark. And then I'm like, wait, what happened? And the lights came back on and the computer basically rebooted after that. Yeah. So basically, yeah, I didn't even realize there's actually a storm going on. Like, wow, it is actually... So right now, I'm just looking at the temperature. It's 12 degrees outside. I didn't even realize it was, like, freezing. So yeah, it's really cold outside. So hopefully hopefully I don't lose power again. But that was a little bit concerning. But yeah, there's a pretty big storm going on. What's funny is, like, last week, oh, you just saw, yeah. Last week, when I went to Microcenter for the launch of the 7900 XTX and the XT, on the way back, so I wasn't able to get the XTX, so I was a little bit disappointed. But I did end up buying the XT. And then on the way back, apparently, like, I kept getting alerts on my phone saying that there's, like, a tornado nearby somewhere. And I was like, are you serious? And then, like, you know how it is when there's, like, a bad storm? Whenever you're, like, inside the zone of the storm, like, you don't actually notice the storm. But if you look around you, you can see, like, everything's all dark. So yeah, like a week ago, I had to drive through a tornado warning, and then now I'm dealing with like a snow, like it's not really a snowstorm. I looked outside; it's not really snowing or anything. It was snowing earlier today, though. Like during the day, it was snowing. We had flurries, but they didn't stay on the ground. Yeah, you're getting snow in the Midwest. South Europe is way too hot. Yeah, that sounds like... So, I guess, like, in the U.S., I think the only place right now that is not in a bad, like, snowstorm or a winter mix type scenario is Florida. I think Florida is the only part of the country that currently has normal weather while everyone else... I mean, Hawaii is like the other place, but like Hawaii is just kind of, whatever. But yeah, like Florida's like the only place in the country right now. Well, I mean, not the northern part of it, but like the southern part, the peninsula part, like Miami, Orlando, like Disney World, that whole area. They basically have perfect weather while everybody else is just kind of in either a snowstorm or there's rolling blackouts with power not being reliable. And I really hope that I don't lose power again. But I don't know. I may have to cut the stream soon anyway, because I do need to probably check on some stuff outside to make sure there's not like an actual thing going on outside with the power. When I think of Southern Europe, I think of like Greece, Italy. I mean, yeah, maybe Spain and Portugal. Yeah, I guess. Basically, like countries that are that have like the Mediterranean Sea, like countries that border the Mediterranean Sea is kind of what I think of when I think of like South Europe. You're getting -5 airtime. Yeah, I think I know right now I'm getting I'm getting negative anywhere from -2 to 11 degrees on the wind chill. Right now my air temperature is 12. It's 12 degrees. And we're talking Fahrenheit, not Celsius. But like 12 F to C real quick. That's like -11 degrees in Celsius for those in Europe that are wondering what that is. So right now, for me, it is negative 11 outside in Celsius. And the wind chill is like negative 19. So yeah, it's pretty bad outside. Man, I just hope that the power stays up, like, at least in the morning, because if there's a 40, or not 4080, I mean, if there's like, if there's a 4090 drop, but I mean, realistically, I don't have enough money left to spend on a 4090. I've spent so much money on computer upgrades in the last few months, right? Like, I bought the 7950X. I stupidly bought the 13900K. I'm not sure why I bought it. I guess the views on the channel. I don't know. Like, I'm thinking of other content I can do for the Intel processor. I do want to make more content with this processor. I just really haven't figured out what. Aside from like delving into more like undervolting possibly, or looking at like what the BIOS, what the Gigabyte BIOS. Like how its power limit behavior is on the 13900K. Like whether we're doing enforced limits, motherboard limits, or unlimited power, and see what that does to temperatures. I mean, maybe that would be an interesting video. Yeah, it's definitely winter right now. Or it definitely feels like winter. So fun fact, for those wondering, I was thinking, well, I'm not going to get the 5800X 3D. I was thinking about getting the 5800X 3D, but I decided not to get that. Instead, I bought this, and this is probably why I can't afford a 4090 anymore. So I did buy a Ryzen 7. So let's go back to these deals real quick. So remember how I was recommending this bundle? Well, it turns out I actually went and bought this bundle. So I have the memory right here, the 32 gigabytes of DDR5 6000, and the Ryzen 7 7700X. So I was thinking, like, should I get this or should I get the 5800X 3D? Well, I feel like going into next year, this processor will probably be more relevant, although I could have made a big mistake. In that maybe I should have just waited for the X3D. But we'll see. I mean, at least now I have a reference point of comparison for that CPU. Because I do have a feeling that the next X3D is going to be an 8-core like this. So, you know, now I have the 5800X right here. And then I have the 7700X right here. So now I've got both of them to compare. And then on the Intel side, I have obviously the 13900K. I have the old 12700K or the 12700K. I've got this guy. You can see he's like right in the box. He's not doing anything. He's just kind of sitting in the box, just waiting to see some action. And then we've got the probably my favorite Intel processor that I don't know why I have this. But guess what? Here it is. Here it is. The official Olympic processor from Intel, which is, you know what? The infamous 11th gen. The 11700K, my favorite. Oh man, I had to have this. So I have this too now. Well, realistically, I'm going to use these computers for different systems. Like this one is not going to stick with me for very long. Like this is actually going to be a present. And then, but I have it to show like the numbers and stuff. And then the 12700K, I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I'm going to keep it, but I don't know what I'm going to do with it. So we'll see. The thing is with 12700K, I can use this processor with the, for CPU reviews, this is still kind of relevant, but we'll see. I don't know. What I found is the 11700K is kind of, it's a weird processor. In some cases, it's like the same as the 700K. In some cases, it's actually worse. In other cases, it's actually like quite a bit better. But it kind of goes back and forth. Like in my mind, the way I see it is this, like the 5800X or the 5700X and the 11700K are supposed to be rivals, sort of. Like, because this was 2020, right? Like the Ryzen 5000 was it was like it launched when the RTX 3080, the RDNA 2, the PS5. Yeah, so this was like 2020. End of 2020 was the Zen 3. And then Intel responded with the Olympic processor, aka 11th gen. And it performed, a lot of people called this thing a waste of silicon. Steven Gamers X has called it a waste of sand, whatever. It shouldn't exist. I don't know. I just thought it was like a cool processor. The reason why I wanted to get it, the reason why I have it, is because it's the very last of a long line of 14 nanometer plus processors from Intel. So this is it, guys. The very last 14 nanometer processor. So there you go. So I got that one. And then, of course, Alder Lake. So for basically reference points. So going into next year, like for CPU reviews, it is good to have these on hand for benchmarking CPUs for my own independent comparison, because obviously you could just compare it to the top ones. Like I could take the 3D next year, compare it with 13900K, but I will not be buying the KS. Like guaranteed, I will not buy the 13900KS. Absolutely not. I don't believe that the KS parts are worth it. They're just a big money grab. You can just overclock one of these and get the same numbers. In fact, the Gigabyte BIOS that I have on my Gigabyte motherboard for this processor, it literally has a instant 6 gigahertz mode. I'll show you guys what I'm talking about, and we'll probably end the stream shortly after this. But if you look at the Gigabyte, so this is my motherboard that I have on the 1300K. If we go to the BIOS downloads, so check this out. It literally has instant 6 gigahertz profile for the 1300K, which is what I have, or the KF. And it even works for the 13700K or KF. Now, whether or not this is actually stable, I don't know, especially for like an i7. But this is the reason why I will definitely not buy the KS. Like, even though they say that it's like the world's first 6 gigahertz processor, that's what the marketing gimmick messaging from Intel is going to be. I don't care. Like, this is it, guys. Like, I'm not buying another Intel processor for a very long time. Definitely, I'm not going to buy any Intel processor next year. I will probably buy the Zen 4 3D V-Cache, but I have no intention of buying a 5800X 3D. That is the reason why I bought the 7700X, so I have a frame of reference comparison for testing purposes with the upcoming X3D. So I did want this for comparison, because I do feel like it's not going to be fair to compare a 7950X to an 8-core V-Cache. I think this is a more apples-to-apples comparison. And then I also wanted an 8-core Intel for comparison, and that's the reason why we have Rocket Lake. And that's where the 12700K, it being an 8-core, with 4 E-cores, being the last gen Intel, is still technically a possible comparison. I mean, the only other thing I could do is like take the 13900K, turn off what is this? This is an 8-core plus 16. Yeah, I could turn off 8 E-cores to turn this into a 13700K, and then try to like power limited enough so that it behaves as much like a 13700K as possible, but it's still going to have more cache. So it's still not the same thing. So the third model of the Ryzen is a way better option compared to the KS model that Intel has. Oh, the 3D model. Yeah. The 3D model of the Ryzen. Yeah. See, what I feel like, what I'm pretty sure is going to happen early next year, or within the first half of next year, AMD is going to launch the 3D. That's going to retake the crown in gaming the same way the 5800X 3D did that when it launched earlier this year. And then Intel basically launched, or they like countered with the KS, the 12900KS. But realistically, I feel like the X3D, the 5800X 3D, and the like, if we just go here to show it, like 5800X 3D, and then on this guy, the i9 12900KS, like, man, whoever paid like the original launch price for this, like, they really get screwed over big time. That's the reason why I'll never buy the KS, because it's such a money grab by Intel. Like, now it's way down in price only because the 13900K is out, but like this thing launched at like, I think it was $699. I think this is fake. It was never 900. It was like $699. It's like it had the MSRP of an RTX 3080. That's how ridiculous this processor was. Just for the processor. Think about that. At least the 3080 is a full graphics card with VRAM and stuff. This is literally just a piece of silicon with a bunch of cores and cache for that much money. So it's like, yeah, no. And then like this, this like competes with it in gaming. So and it's Zen 3. It isn't even like current architecture. So like that to me is the reason why. See, because you had what, an older architecture on par, and in some cases beating, and in some cases losing to this. So that's the reason why I feel like next year when the Vcache Zen 4 comes out, that's probably going to be the fastest thing, because realistically, like the Zen 4 right now, like for instance the 7700X, like let's do TechSpot 7700X review. Like, let's look at this real quick, and this is probably where we'll end the stream. But if we go and look at where's the games? We gotta go all the way down. I think we gotta go way down to the... I just want to see the average. I don't need to see the individual. So right here, like, look at this. Check this out. This is the 7700X at the top of the chart, beating the i9 12900K, and the 12900K has the DDR5 6400. So the DDR4 12900K is 193. This is the reason why, like, when people were saying, like, oh, 13th gen is better value than Ryzen 7000 because you can just reuse your DDR4 memory. Well, the moment you use the DDR4 memory, it's not going to be the fastest processor. If you want the 13900K to be as fast as advertised by reviewers, you have to pair it up with DDR5. And that defeats the whole, like, price advantage that Intel has. Like, oh, yes, you can pair it up with an old Z690 motherboard. You don't have to buy the expensive Z9 or Z790 motherboard. And then that does make it still a little bit cheaper than the AMD stuff. But, you know, it's going to be, like, that's it. You buy 13th gen, and that's basically it. There's no new CPU coming next year to upgrade to, or, like, 2 years down the line or 3 years down the line. So that's basically it. So... whereas with the Zen stuff, you basically have processor upgrades on the same board. So yeah, that's why I feel like, I don't know, I feel like the Ryzen stuff's still the better way to go. Especially for someone who's upgrading from a really, really old computer that has DDR3 memory. So, but yeah, right here, like, it beats the Ryzen 9. And then at 14, did he do 1440? Well, I guess that doesn't matter because we're looking at CPU benchmarks with 1080p. So yeah, see? So it's basically the fastest one. Like, only when the 13900K showed up, then that was faster. But now, if we go look at view. Okay, see, so 13700K, this is actually the correct comparison. Well, actually, technically, in core count, this is more like the 7900, but whatever. We'll just look at the, again, the 12 game average. Because that's what everybody seems to want to care about. Like, obviously, there's all this productivity stuff, but that's where those E-cores do help out. Where's the 12 average? So if we go down here. So right here. So look. So here is, down here is the 13700K with DDR4 memory. So 13700K with DDR4 is slower than the 7700X. In fact, so he tested, okay, so he tested the 7700X with DDR5 6000. And it's 240 versus 225. So if someone's going to cheap out and get the 13700K with DDR4, I mean, yeah, it's still really good. You know, now, okay, what I find interesting is with DDR4, the 13700K is basically the same as a 5800 X3D. In fact, the 5800 X3D technically is a little bit faster. And then the 7600X is a little bit faster than that. And then just kind of goes up from there. So the only Intel processor with DDR4 memory that can beat the 5800 X3D while still being on DDR4 is the 13900K. And that's because that thing, you know, runs up to like 100 degrees Celsius in an instant when you're trying to do a Cinebench run. But the thing is, like in gaming, realistically it's not going to overheat. Because of all the cache, it's got more cache than the other Intel parts, and that's the reason why it does better. And then when you bring this thing up to DDR5, then it gets another good bump to the top of the list. So realistically, like, not counting the 13900K, like the 13700K and the 7700X in gaming are basically the same. Like, so, I mean, that answers that. So, these are going to be, like, used next year a lot for, like, CPU comparisons. So that's why I need these processors. The 3D model of the Ryzen is, okay, it also draws 350 watts. Yeah, and it uses a ton of electricity. So, now the thing is, I have mine power limited, so I actually need to retest with the enforced Intel power limits to see what the results are. I have a feeling, though, that the Intel processor, I looked at DeBauer's video, I'm pretty sure me undervolting my 13900K doesn't really, or not undervolt, I didn't undervolt it, I power limited it. With the power limit, I'm pretty sure I'm not losing gaming performance. I'm losing, like, multi-thread performance by a small amount. But I'm pretty sure, like, it's world's first CPU that draws as much power as the 3090. Yeah, it didn't win that award. I mean, they probably need to make a category for that. Yeah, you know, we need to see, like, there needs to be some, maybe I should make a video on that now that I think about it. Although, I don't want to make a video for, like, what I think is, like, the best processor of the year, the worst processor of the year. I could do that, but I don't really feel like, I don't think I tested enough products to be able to make that comment. Although, I gotta think about it. Because, well, see, I don't have an i5. So I can't determine objectively if the 13600K is as good as everybody says it is. I still think it's a pretty good product. The 13700K actually changed my mind. Initially, with the Intel parts, I thought the i5 was the best one. In terms of price per dollar, but now that I think about it, as time has gone by, I actually think the i7, just like last year, where I said that the 12700K was the best one out of the three, and I think Hardware Unbox echoed the same opinion, they kind of say the same opinion. I do think that the 13700K continues that trend. I still think the 13700K is a decent amount ahead, although I don't see the 13.5 on here, or 13.6 is not on here. So yeah, but yeah, I still think the 13700K is a really good all-rounder. So that's a good one. 13900K, no way. Like this thing might be my biggest regret of the year in terms of how much money I spent on this. Maybe the bigger regret is buying the stupid Z790 Aorus Master motherboard, because that thing, not being able to use the top M.2 slot without cutting my graphics card bandwidth in half in terms of PCIe lanes. That's a big facepalm moment. But thankfully, the Z790 Aorus Master actually has 5 M.2 drive slots. So I just don't have to use the top one. So I still have 4 available. So it still ends up being the same as the X670 board. Yeah, but this one's probably Intel's best one. The i7. i7 tends to always be their lucky number, right? The i7 has always been their historically their most famous processor in terms of the naming convention. But this is going to be my array of CPUs to test with. So I guess for one thing, I did hit 7K subs. Yeah, I can't like claim whatever money back on any of this stuff, but I see it as something that now I actually have my test bed set up. So I have a test set up for 5800X, 11700K. I have 2 different platforms set up for those. I have obviously the 12700 and the 13900 use the exact same socket, so they use the same board, so there's consolidation there. And then I have for AM5, we have an 8-core to test, and we have the full 16-core to test. So I kind of have that. So I have a single CCD that I can disable 2 cores and effectively turn it into a Ryzen 5 if I want to. And then I have the dual CCD, and I can disable some cores and turn this into a 7700 or 7900X if I need to test that one as well. So yeah, that's why I don't. Well, even then, I think most people still think of like i7. Like when you say you have an i7, people think, oh, you have an i7. Oh, that's cool. But if you say you have an i5, it's like, oh, it's just an i5. If you have an i9, people think, okay, so either they don't know what that is or they don't really care because it doesn't really add much value compared to the i7. See, it's almost like the i7 is kind of like, if you have an i7, you're seen as someone who's kind of like the savvy tech person. Like you don't want to like throw an enormous amount of money on an i9, but you do have something that's better than an i5, and it's close to an i9, and it's not like super expensive, and it doesn't consume copious amounts of electricity. So that's why I feel like the i7 is still going to be like the cool kid on the block compared to the i9. The i9 is just kind of bragging rights among like tech enthusiasts who actually care. Like the average person doesn't even care. They don't even know what this is, to be honest. Like who cares? Like I wave it around like it's a trophy, but it's like no one really cares at the end of the day. I might as well just like wave around or either this or like my actually my favorite one to wave around is this. I like to show it off. The Olympic processor, the 11th gen, my favorite Intel processor of the decade, Rocket Lake. What do people think when you say you have a 7350K? Oh, an i3? I don't know, man. I don't want to think about what people think when you say you have an i3 7350K. I don't know. I've never owned an i3, so I don't plan on owning an i3 anytime soon. i3 that one was the cool one though, right? Like that was the one i3 that was like the smart one. All the other i3s before that were like trash dual core or something. Your favorite Intel product is the Intel. Yeah. You know what? That's probably the product that would win the award for it's not the most disappointing product because it actually works. It doesn't perform as good as Intel wanted to, but I don't think that disappointed the public. It disappointed Intel more than anyone else. Yeah, Arc is good. Arc is good. I mean, I've got it. I've got the box right here. I still have my box, my Intel Arc box over here. I'm still waiting for them to give me an actual control panel. Then I'll retest it. But I can't be bothered to deal with that right now. Like I wanted to do more Arc content. But there's too many other things that are more interesting right now for me. I want to do a video covering like how to make Ryzen, like how to turn the Ryzen 7000 series into like a generic office PC. Like you don't overclock the RAM. You run the RAM at the base, not the base spec, but like the highest official spec, which would be 5200 megahertz instead of like 6000. You basically run everything in stock. And what is the performance like? Basically, what would be the performance if you bought like a Dell or HP pre-build that's not like an Alienware or an HP Omen, just a generic office PC. Using an AM5 based Ryzen platform. So you have like, cheap RAM running at like 5200 megahertz, like 32 gigs of it, or maybe 64 gigabytes because it's supposed to be like a work PC. And then see what the performance of like an average Joe pre-build workstation air-cooled PC is like for AM5. Maybe do the same thing with Intel. Although Intel, I feel like most office PCs are already Intel anyway. So I feel like that'll be even less interesting. The 1200K is a good i3 as well, I guess. I don't really pay much attention to the i3s. It's good to know they're still around because I haven't really seen like a Ryzen 3. Like, do they still make Ryzen 3s? I don't even know if they have a Ryzen 3. 6 is as small as they go. Wait, 6 core? What is 6? Oh, the 6 core? They used to have Ryzen 3. But I guess they're all like Ryzen 5 now. Because there was a Ryzen 3 1400X, like first gen Ryzen. There was a Ryzen 3 2300X or something. I can't remember anymore. Yeah, that's probably my like weakest area in like enthusiast tech is like the low end of the market, like 12100. I don't really know like the specs on that. Anything older, like all the Intel stuff from like Skylake, or I guess if you were to ask me like you just asked recently about like the 7350K, I had to remember that was an i3 for a second because at first I was thinking, what is that? Like, is that a graphics card? But yeah, so the anything from like lower than a i5 8400, I don't really keep track of any of those lower end SKUs. So like the ones I really don't know are the Comet Lake stuff. So like 10th gen Intel, and then it gets really what gets confusing to me is the fact that Coffee Lake was 8000, but then there was also the 9000 series, and they had different motherboards. Because remember the i7 8700K was a Coffee Lake processor, and it had a Z370 motherboard. The strongest R3 is the Ryzen 3 3300X. So that was the last one. Yeah, that was from 2019. So that was the last Ryzen 3, huh? So there was no Zen 3 based Ryzen 3. So that means that Zen 2 was the only generation where AMD had a Ryzen 3, a Ryzen 5, a Ryzen 7, and a Ryzen 9. Oh, okay, there's a 5100. So does Microcenter just like never sell that? Ryzen 3 5300? There's a 5300G. It says OEM only. 65 watts. That means this comes with one of those like boxed coolers, but it's OEM only. Oh, you said 5100. CPU, is that for real? So here's the Zen 2. But it was pretty bad. Because I know they had like the Cezanne ones, which were like the Ryzen 7 5700G. I remember this one. So the only problem with these was because they're an APU, they have a graphics component to them. They had way less cache. Basically, they reduced the cache to make room for the graphics, the integrated graphics component. So, and that's the reason why this was significantly worse than like a Ryzen 7 5700X or a 5800X. Oh, the other thing too about this is this only supports PCI Gen 3. This didn't even support PCI Gen 4. You know, the other thing too that I did notice, like with my updated platform, so like every single one of my CPU test beds that I have are all PCI Gen 4 or PCI Gen 5. Now, we don't have any PCI Gen 5 graphics cards, so I'm able to test PCIe scaling across all my platforms now. Because you guys remember, Rocket Lake, even Intel's 11th gen Rocket Lake, the cool thing about Rocket Lake is it's one of those, like, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire trivia. Like, if I ask somebody, what was Intel's very first processor to support PCI Gen 4? Like, a lot of people might assume 12th gen Alder Lake, but that's actually incorrect. It's actually Rocket Lake, 11th gen. So this was the first PCI 4 generation for the chipset, or the CPU and the chipset from Intel. So they were really behind AMD when you think about it, because AMD introduced PCI Gen 4 support with Zen 2. So with X570 back in 2019 with the Ryzen 3000 series CPUs. Intel didn't catch up to them until last year with Rocket Lake, which means AMD had like a 2-year lead with PCI Gen 4 before Intel actually rolled it out. So that was really weird. Like, anyone who bought like 11 or 10th gen Comet Lake, like a 10700K or any of those variants, especially like the 10 core 10900K, like they're stuck on PCI Gen 3. It's like, I mean, it kind of makes sense when you look at like a 4090 and how that scales with PCIe bandwidth. So, but it only really matters for like, you know, 3080 Ti and above. So anything lower than that, then it doesn't really matter too much. But I mean, it does kind of matter if you buy like a cheap GPU that only has like a by 8 or a by 4, like, you know, like a Ryzen, or not Ryzen, like a Radeon RX 6400, for example. That's only like an X4 PCIe lane graphics card. You already knew that, since my motherboard has PCI Gen 4, but it only works. Yeah, and that's the thing. Yeah, because the motherboard that I have is actually this one. So I actually have this very motherboard. So this is actually how I got my Rocket Lake, guys. So I actually bought this thing. Well, actually, I paid $248. It was cheaper during Black Friday. It was $248 or $247. It's actually a little bit more expensive now. But yeah, this is actually the motherboard I have. This is how I cheaped out and got Rocket Lake. So I've got one of these, and I was looking at the manual when I was building the test bed for Rocket Lake, it kept saying like PCI 4/PCI 3. I'm like, why is it PCI 4/3? Shouldn't it just be 4? And then I realized, oh, you can actually install a 10th gen Comet Lake in this board, and those don't do PCI 4. So that's when I realized, okay, that's why. You're gonna use the 4080 with. Wait, don't you have? Why would you use it with the 10700 if you have a 5700X? I guess you could use it with either one, right? You can upgrade the CPU when but why don't you just? Because the 5700X is faster than the 10700K, and it's PCI Gen 4. So why wouldn't you just use it with Gen 4? I mean, that's what I would do. That doesn't make sense to me, but I mean, you can. You could also be like me and get one of these so you have the Gen 4 activated on the motherboard. But, you know, that's how Intel upsells you. But this is going to be like a side grade to like more like a side grade, if anything, really. But the other reason why I did get one of these, the second reason is because it has the Olympics logo on it. No, but in all seriousness, the reason why I did buy this is because it does support AVX 512. So fun fact, Rocket Lake is the last consumer Intel desktop product to have full support for AVX 512. So in the future, if I want to do a video about AVX 512, now I have an Intel CPU that does it, and I have an AMD CPU that does it. Well, I mean, all the Ryzen 7000 stuff does it. So that's cool, because technically my 12700K being from the very first batch of Alder Lake, this CPU does also support AVX 512. However, I don't have a motherboard that allows me to turn on AVX 512. I would have to buy or find some Z690. It's like a specific MSI Unify something, and you have to find like a custom. It's not custom. It was an official BIOS, but I have to like scour the internet for that one BIOS, and have that one motherboard, and that's just way too much work. So it's just easier to just have full native support, like with the Rocket Lake stuff. So I don't know, guys. I might actually look into AVX 512, because I do have the 8-core AMD that has AVX 512, and I have the Intel 8-core that also does AVX 512. So there we go. I've got AVX 512 on both Intel and AMD. The mini ITX case. Oh, that's right, because you do have the Ryzen CPU with the Intel. Wait, hold on. So you've got Arc with the 5700X. So you basically did what I did. You paired Arc with a Ryzen CPU, because that's exactly what I did. It's paired up with my 5800X. I found that it's less headache. It's less of a headache to install it into a system that doesn't have integrated graphics. Anytime I try to install it into my Intel motherboard, I have to disconnect the I don't know why I have to do this, but I either have to turn off my integrated graphics in the BIOS, so it'll force it to output off of the Arc GPU, or I have to unplug the monitor and plug it into the motherboard, and then install the Arc control or update the graphics, and then I can plug it into the Arc GPU. It's so weird. Like, I don't know why they do it that way. Although, you know, I haven't tested it with an Intel product or an Intel processor ever since launch. I've tested Arc with two Ryzen CPUs, 5800X and the 7950. These are the two CPUs that have actually been paired up with Arc. That I've actually like benchmarked games and actually did stuff with it. I briefly connected it with the Alder Lake CPU and then ran into all those weird issues and then just never did it again. I don't want to turn it off, though, because it's like I tend to use it for... Sometimes I'll use QuickSync. But yeah, like if I have Arc, then I would just render with Arc instead of the iGPU. I don't know. I just don't like to turn off my integrated graphics because, like, even right now, like I have integrated graphics running on like all of the test systems. Yeah, I would assume that's the case. It's just like when I first installed it into the Alder Lake system, I assumed that the BIOS in the motherboard is smart enough to auto detect we have a monitor connected to this graphics card, therefore we need to display an image to the monitor. But for some reason, it didn't do that. I had a black screen and had no idea what was going on until I thought, oh, you know what? Let me just plug it into the monitor. I mean, let me plug it into the motherboard and see what happens. And sure enough, as soon as I plugged it into the motherboard, I got my Windows login screen. So the bottom line is, yeah, if you turn off the iGPU, but for the average user who would forget to do that, you know, like someone who doesn't know that much about tech might think that the graphics card's defective. Like worst case scenario, someone buys ARC, they go and plug it into their, i7 or i5 generic Intel desktop, and they go to turn it on and they get a black screen, and then they think that their GPU is defective, so they immediately go and return it to the store and exchange it for another one that will do the same thing, or they try to do an RMA and there's nothing wrong with it, and they deal with, like, who knows what that process is like, RMing something to Intel directly. So but if someone's on a KF, that KF don't have integrated graphics, so they would never run into that problem. Or if they're on Ryzen, like most Ryzen CPUs, they don't have integrated graphics, so they would never have that problem. And they don't have to do anything in the BIOS, so that makes it really easy. So who would have thought, like, the smoothest onboarding experience for the Intel Arc GPU is to pair it up with an AMD Ryzen CPU? The stream is lagging right now. Well, I've still got power. It's like 11 degrees outside. Well, I think this is a good stopping point because I think we covered the deals. So the bottom line is there are some decent deals for air coolers on Newegg. From what I could tell, there's this one power supply for $100, but I don't think if this was an 850, this would be a really good deal. But because this is only a 750, I don't think that's that great of a deal. But really, if you live near a Microcenter, they've got really good bundles for Intel and AMD. If you have a really, really old CPU, like and you're on DDR3, just get a Ryzen 7000 series CPU. You'll just save yourself a whole lot of trouble, and you give yourself a lot of runway to upgrade later on with the same motherboard and the same memory. And then if you want the Intel 12th gen, it makes sense if you can reuse your existing DDR4 memory. Just know that you will be sacrificing some performance by sticking with DDR4, but depending on where you're coming from, this is still a massive upgrade regardless. So then that makes sense. And then if you're like me and you want the meme CPU of the decade, then get this. I mean, it's less than 300 right now. Like, ideally, you would have wanted to buy this during Black Friday when it was like 250 for both of these. So, and you can reuse your DDR4 because I'm just going to reuse a bunch of DDR4. Yeah, that's basically it. So, with that said, I'm probably going to go ahead and end the stream. I guess if you guys are trying to get GPUs, regardless of whether it's the 4080, 4090, or the AMD 7000 series GPUs, good luck trying to get those because I'm still struggling to get one of those before the end of the year. But we'll see what happens. We got, like a week left, essentially, to try to snag one of these. But yeah, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and get on out of here, guys. And so once again, thanks for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Thanks.